Senate will come to order. Senate will come to order for this Tuesday, March 2nd at 2 p.m. We have the roll call, please.
Roll call for Tuesday, March 2nd. Anderson.
Here.
Baldwin. Beitman. Boner. Bouchard. Case.
Present.
Cooper. Driscoll. Ellis. French. Murphy. Guru. Hicks. Hutchings. James. Kinski. Kolb. Cost. Landon. McCune. Nethercott. Pappas. Perkins. Rothfuss. Salazar. Schuler. Scott. Steinmetz. Wasserberger. President Dockstader.
Here.
30 present.
Thank you. Members of the Senate, we're excusing Senator Case today. Today we remember and ask that you keep in your hearts and prayers the family of Senator Cale Case. Senator Case has been joining the Senate, as you've noticed, these proceedings by remote video in order to attend to his family and family services and the loss of a family member. Senator Case's brother, George Harold Case, which Senator Case's son is named after George Harold. He is also known as Spike, affectionately by friends and family, has passed away, and a service is being held today in a small cemetery near Bluffdale, Texas this afternoon. So to our friend and colleague, we offer our condolences, and we ask that Pastor Sean Sales of Calvary Baptist Church, when he offers prayer, that he remember the Case family in this opening prayer of the Senate today on this Tuesday, the 2nd day of March, 2021. Pastor Sales.
Please join with me as we pray. Well, gracious Heavenly Father, I am so thankful that you are a God who sees and cares about the people in your creation. Oh, Lord, we would pray specifically for the Case family today. Lord, we would pray for your grace, your mercy, for your comfort as they grieve. Oh, Lord, I pray that they would have sweet memories of their family member who's departed. Oh, Lord, I pray that they would find the support of friends around them as well. Oh, Lord, we do pray for this legislative body today, for the Senate as they gather together. Lord, I'm thankful for each man and woman who's serving here today. Lord, thankful for the time investment, thankful for the wisdom that they bring. Lord, I pray that they would seek to rule rightly, to make good legislation, to think through the things that they do, Lord, that they would be empowered to do so. Father, I'm thankful also for the volunteers here, the ones who are behind the scenes and moving everything around and getting everything prepared for them. Lord, we would pray in all things that there would be an attempt made to honor and glorify you in all that we do and say. We pray this in the name of my Savior. Amen.
Senator Baldwin, would you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Go to new business now. Oh, I've got it. I'm good. Speaking of getting closer, I'll divert from my script here and have Senator Bill Landon speak about being close to the microphone. Senator Landon, would you give us some counsel today?
Being lighted here. Mr. President, thank you. That's a nice appropriate segue into an announcement the president and I talked about. Just regarding yesterday, everybody did a terrific job. I wanted to commend everyone for that, but I would just encourage, when you can, get as close to the microphone as possible, because some of the speakers maybe aren't working as well as they should. It's hard to hear in the chamber. So Let's pay attention to our microphones a little bit, Mr. President, and then we can have a great debate. Thank you.
Excellent. Great segue, yes. I had repairs done to my speakers, so I'm not listening to your echoes. I get to hear you up the desk. So a few other items of new business, non-emergency medical referrals, University of Wyoming Family Practice handling that. We do have a phone number available for you at 307-214-4508. And again, we appreciate our chaplain for the day, Pastor Sean Sells, Calgary Chapel, Cheyenne. Today in Wyoming history, in 1890, Fort Laramie's status as an active U.S. Army post ends. Quote for the day: nothing can stop the man with the right mental attitude from achieving his goal. Nothing on earth can help the man with the wrong attitude. Thomas Jefferson. So some of you will have goals today. Session status tomorrow is the last day for Senate files to be introduced for Senate Rule 4512 noon. Introduction and reading references of bills. We've got some work here, folks. We're piling heavily on a couple of committees, and if you feel like your committee would like some more work, perhaps you could visit with these chairmen and solicit some opportunities to take some of their load. But in the meantime, this is how we're going to do it. Senate File 116, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 116, Wyoming Business Council Directors Reduction, sponsored by Senator Ellis.
Senate File 16 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. Senate File 117, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 117, Speech and Hearing Specialist Licensing Amendments, sponsored by Senator Pepys.
Senate File 117 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor Health. Senate File 118, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 118, Rental Assistance Program, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee.
Senate File 118 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 119, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 119, Investment of State Permanent Funds, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee.
Senate File 119 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 120, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 120, Investment of State Non-Permanent Funds, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee.
Senate File 120 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 121, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 121, State Funds, Investments, and Distributions, sponsored by Senator Perkins.
Senate File 121 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 122, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 122, Wyoming Agriculture Authority, sponsored by Senator Boner.
Senate File 122 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Senate File 123, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 123, Lottery Games Keno, sponsored by Senator Nethercott.
Senate File 123, referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 124, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 124, Defending Wyoming Business, Trade, and Commerce Amendments, sponsored by Senator Nethercott.
Senate File 124 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 125, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 125, Consumer Merchandise Sale, Marketing, and Use Protection, sponsored by Senator Cooper.
Senate File 125 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 126, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 126, Real Estate Subdivisions Easement Requirements, sponsored by Senator Cooper.
Senate File 126 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 127, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 127, Wyoming Learn While You Earn Program, sponsored by Senator Kinski.
Senate File 127 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Senate File 128, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 128, Temporary Delegation of Parental Authority, sponsored by Senator Kinski.
Senate File 128 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 129, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 129, Medicaid Coverage Licensed Pharmacist, sponsored by Senator Kinski.
Senate File 129 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor. Senate File 130, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 130, Charter Schools, sponsored by Senator Driscoll.
Senate File 130 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Senate File 131,
Senate File 131,
first reading of the bill.
Senate File 131, Workplace Transparency Act 2, sponsored by Senator Salazar.
Senate File 131 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor Health. Senate File 132, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 132, Emergency Preparedness, sponsored by Senator Salazar.
Senate File 132 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 133, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 133, Prohibiting Abortifacients and Chemical Abortions, sponsored by Senator Salazar.
Senate File 133 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 134,
Senate File
first reading of
1,
the bill.
beg your pardon, Senate File 134, Lodging Tax Exemption for Residents, sponsored by Senator French.
Senate File 134 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Senate File 135, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 135, Water Rights Livestock on Federal Land, sponsored by Senator Hicks.
Senate File 135 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Senate File 136, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 136, Required Public Service Commission Considerations, sponsored by Senator Perkins.
Senate File 136 referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 137, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 137, Firearms Preemption Amendments and Applicability, sponsored by Senator Kinski.
Senate File 137 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 138, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 138, School Board Trustees Party Affiliation, sponsored by Senator Ellis.
Senate File 138 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Senate File 139, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 139, Community-Based In-Home Services Program, sponsored by the Senate Appropriations Committee.
Senate File 139 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 140, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 140, Human Trafficking Minors, sponsored by Senator Salazar.
Senate File 140 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 141, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 141, Business Entities Representation in Detainer Cases, sponsored by Senator Perkins.
Senate File 141 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. Senate File 142, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 142, Prohibition on Private Funds for Conducting Elections, sponsored by Senator Steinmetz.
Senate File 142 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 143, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 143, School Finance Funding Model Amendments, sponsored by Senator Scott.
Senate File 143 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Senate File 144, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 144, Public Funds Lobbying, sponsored by Senator Beitman.
Senate File 144 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 145, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 145, Election Runoffs, sponsored by Senator Beitman.
Senate File 145 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 146, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 146, Six-Person Juries in Civil Cases, sponsored by Senator Nethercott.
Senate File 146 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 147, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 147, Management Council Authority and Legislative Committees, sponsored by Senator Hicks.
Senate File 147 is referred to Committee Number 12, Rules. Senate File 148, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 148, Requirements Relating to Depositors Amendments, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss.
Senate File 148 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. Senate File 149, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 149, Oil and Gas Royalty and Tax Rates, sponsored by Senator Boner.
Senate File 149 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. Senate File 151, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 151, Pharmacy Freedom of Choice, sponsored by Senator Nethercott.
Senate File 151 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor Health. Senate File 152, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 152, Connection of Utility Services, sponsored by Senator Dockstader.
Senate File 152 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. Senate File 153, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 153, Nonprofit Affiliation and Protection, sponsored by Senator Hicks.
Senate File 153 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 154, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 154, Medicaid Expansion with Federal Match Requirements, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss.
Senate File 154 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor Health. Senate File 155, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 155, Limiting Firearm Seizure and Regulation During Emergencies, sponsored by Senator Driscoll.
Senate File 155 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 156, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 156, Incest Amendments, sponsored by Senator Beitman.
Senate File 156 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 157, first reading of the bill.
Senate File 157, Property Rights Limitation on Local Authority, sponsored by Senator Beitman.
Senate File 157 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Senate Joint Resolution Number 4, first reading of the joint resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution Number 4, School Capital Construction Constitutional Amendment, sponsored by Senator Scott.
Senate Joint Resolution is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. We bypassed as we jumped into our discussion about being close to the microphone. So could I have reading correction approval of the journal? Will the reading clerk please read the journal committee report?
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 1, 2021 has been read. It recommends that it be approved. Senator Kolb, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any objections? There being none, report is adopted. Thank you, Senator Kolb. So let's proceed now to bills on second reading. Go ahead. Please, Senator Rothfuss. Oh, my goodness, it is that time of year. Please proceed. Oh, yeah. I was so caught up with the hat that I was thrown off.
And
All right.
I understand. Thank you, Mr. President. We have to get closer to these things, right? Let's see. Yeah. Mr. President, we just heard a report from the Journal Committee, our esteemed Journal Committee. And this being Dr. Seuss's birthday and the National Read Across America Day, I thought it would be appropriate for us today to have an ode to the Journal Committee, hastily prepared by me a few moments ago, thanks to the kind reminder by our good reader. So with that, if you would indulge me, Mr. President, I would provide an ode to the Journal Committee.
Please do. And I'm wondering if he just reminded you where you've been keeping that hat. So, but please proceed.
A legion of two scribes for the ages, these wise-witted witnesses, these soothsaying sages. They meet each day prior to the Senate convening to record rightness, or amend motion meaning. They scrutinize ayes, they note all the no's, they tally the times, date the dates, so it goes. And then to the president, a recommendation they make, accept and adopt, or forget and forsake. Oh, what a wonder what action will take. Should we consent or dissent or abstain? Should we resent or retent and retain? Could we just vent discontent and complain? Emotion, it rises like the sun from the east. Will we adopt this rhetorical beast? Does anyone care just a bit in the least? The question is called, the votes they are cast. Another success, the motion has passed. How long will the streak of success for them last? We thank you, esteemed Committee 11, our journal, diurnal, a blessing from heaven. Thanks, Chairman Kolb. Ranking Member Guru. We could not, would not, should not remember a day without you. Thank you, Mr. President.
It's excellent, even more than excellent if you just put that together that fast. That's great. Anybody like to comment? Oh, Senator Kolb, since he was referencing your work, go ahead.
I'll just talk over it.
Here, I'll
I would
go.
like to thank the Cat in the Hat and his very eloquently placed words in these hallowed halls. And we of the Journal Committee will endeavor to do our best. Else we'll face the wrath of their poem.
Journal Chairman Kolb, very good. Vice Majority Floor Leader Driscoll, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate File 30 had an appropriation in it, and I would like to refer to Committee Number 2 Appropriations.
Absent objection, Senate File 30 referred to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. Okay, bills on second reading. First bill up, Senate File 5. There is an amendment, second file, or Senate File 5, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 5, Driving Under the Influence Amendments.
There's an amendment. Will the reading clerk read in the amendment?
Senate File 5, second reading amendment number 1, delete the.
Thank you. Senator Rothfuss, are you taking this amendment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 5. Ask for the body's favorable consideration. Mr. President, this amendment goes into the bill and basically takes out the first section, as you'll see, where that is the section that provides for a criminal contempt of court charge associated with a denial of the warrant that is described in the legislation. So again, this is a policy choice. We had good discussion of it yesterday, Mr. President. And I think there was some sense that this was going too far and some sense that perhaps it wasn't. And hopefully we'll have a little bit more debate today, but it provides a policy opportunity for the body to make a decision specifically about that section. It doesn't change the rest of the bill. It only conforms in one other place where there's a reference back to the 316109, which is created so that it's not referenced any further. This doesn't in any way affect the administrative changes. So the suspension of license, the details there, the rest of the legislation, which as the good chairwoman of the Judiciary Committee pointed out, was necessary to comport with the other statutes and to harmonize the two statutes. So it really is just a policy decision whether or not the body would like, as I would, to delete section 1, which is the criminal penalty associated without seemingly due process, a denial of the search warrant associated with a chemical draw. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or the other proponents can as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. We are back on the bill. Senate File 5. Oh, yeah. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no? Oh, sorry about that. And we are back on the bill. The amendment has passed.
What point of order?
Okay.
Thank you. I'm not sure that everyone heard and maybe the mic wasn't on, Mr. President, the original request for debate and follow-up prior to the motion, or excuse me, prior to the call
Sure.
for the vote.
I asked for questions or follow-up. I did ask that. Okay, this time we're making the call. It passed. All right?
Okay.
Standing division. All those in favor, stand. Those opposed? Okay, remote, we have one. I don't have Senator Case. Okay, now do the count for the noes.
We haven't asked for the remote.
Okay, so we go. Give me that count again, please. Okay, I have two remotes, Senator Case and Senator Anderson. Would you like to vote on this? Are you an aye or a no? Senator Case is an aye. Senator Anderson, you are a aye as well. 15-14 passes, okay. All right, pretty close. We'll get used to this. Senator Case showed up on yours and not mine. Okay. All right. Back on the bill, Senate File 5, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the
Point of
bill?
order. And that time, Mr. President, you didn't call the final, it has passed or make a
Oh,
decision on
okay.
it, even though I heard the vote, but
Okay, 1514, amendment passes.
thank you.
Thank you. Senate File 5, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it shall be ordered. Senate File 9, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 9, State Employee Moving Expenses.
There is an amendment. Reading clerk, read the amendment.
Senate File 9, Second Reading Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 18, delete.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a draft amendment that was caught by our staff. I would move second reading amendment to Senate File 9, second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 9. It goes in on page 2, deletes promulgate rules and inserts develop policies. That just makes the bill consistent, really doesn't change much other than that. Would ask for your support. Thank you.
Questions or discussions on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Amendment has passed. Back on the bill. Any discussion on the bill before we proceed? Senate File 9, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 13, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 13, Abandoned Vehicles Towing Service Liens and Titles.
There are no amendments. Any further discussion? Senate File 13, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 15, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 15, Temporary Licensing and Permitting Authority 2.
There is an amendment. Please read in the amendment.
Senate File 15, Second Reading Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 2, delete.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 15 and would ask for your favorable consideration. Senators, if you look at the bill, there's a list of licensure boards that would be affected by this kind of grace period. But it mentions on lines 2, 1125, 105, which is the Parimutuel Commission. And presently, none of those members have any continuing education or examinations that they have to take. But if you look at the other two mentions of 21-2-802, that's your PTSB board or Professional Teachers Standards Board, and then 23-214 deals with outfitters, and they do have examinations and other requirements. So as the good senator who brought this bill and discussed with us yesterday, we looked at this and thought it was just an omission. So we'd ask for you to strike that reference on line 2. Thank you.
Questions or discussions on the amendment?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor of second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 15, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. We're back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Senate File 15, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 19, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 19, Public Health Emergencies Immunity Amendments.
There are no amendments. Any discussion on the bill? Question being called on second reading. All those in favor, or I'm sorry, Senate File 19, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 33, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 33, Physician Assistance Amendments.
There is an amendment. Read in the amendment, please.
Senate File 33, Second Reading Amendment Number 1, page 1 after line 6.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move second reading amendment 1 to Senate File 33 and ask for your favorable votes. Pretty simple amendments, folks. The first one is lengthy and on the page, but all it does is delete the sentence that says, and the expiration date of the license. We found that when you have to put the license expiration date on there, that these folks would have to get a new ID and a new badge every year. It's already on the license on the wall. There was no need for that on the name tag. So we're going to take that out and just leave that off. The second one is to extend the enforcement date or the effective date from July 2021 to January of 2022 to give the Board of Medicine time to get this rolled out and make it effective. Rather, we're in an abbreviated session that our timing's messed up and they need more time to get it done. So that's all that does. And so I would ask for your favorable vote on that, please.
Senator Perkins, questions? We do go into questions and discussion now.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a question on the amendment. It's kind of relative also to the amendment that we passed yesterday. And so I was just a question for the sponsor of the amendment. Yesterday, we had, I think this goes on the name tag, the identification tag. And so I'm wondering, two things. I was wondering, how do you get all that information on that name tag, and how big does the name tag have to be? And will this enable them to have the name tag smaller than their head? And then also, if you could just share with us, are you aware of any other professions that have to have all this information on their name tag in the healthcare industry?
Further questions before you go back? Let's see if there are any other questions or discussion we can have. All right, Senator Baldwin, that looks like what you're being asked.
Thank you, Mr. President. To answer the first part of that, it depends on the size of your head. Number two is the information on the name tag itself is fairly small. And I think on the amendment, it specified the size. But as for other healthcare information on other healthcare professions, you will probably be seeing a bill coming from somewhere else in this facility that has a very similar amendment on it. And this is something we're going to work with on the committee in the interim, trying to get this to more healthcare professions to make it applicable. And as I said yesterday, this is to hopefully make like PT, RT, so you know who's working on you, you know who's sticking a needle in you. And that's the whole point. But yeah, there are size, and yes, it is smaller than most people's heads.
All right, further discussion on the amendment? Ready for the question? Question on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Amendment is passed. We are back on the bill now. Senate File 19, having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so
Point of
ordered.
order. Wrong bill.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, sorry. That was the amendment passed on Senate File 33. Now we're back on the bill. Senate File 33, having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Senate File 44, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 44, Solid Waste Cease and Transfer Program Funding.
There is an amendment. Read in the amendment.
Senate File 44, second reading amendment number 1, page 4, line 14.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 44 and would ask for your favorable consideration. This goes into page 4, line 14 and deals with the grants for dead animal infrastructure in the cease and transfer bill, and it includes burying them. And for some of those folks, I've got a pretty extensive memo from the Department of Environmental Quality that has reversed a policy that says now under the right soil conditions and groundwater conditions that you can go back and start burying dead animals at these landfills. And so all that does is bring in, that's consistent with the memo that we had received in the Joint Appropriations Committee. If anybody would like that, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to share everything you want to know about burying dead animals in the state of Wyoming. With that, Mr. President, I would ask for your favorable consideration that we allow our municipal and land and county landfills to bury dead animals.
Interesting topics this afternoon. Further discussion on this amendment. Questions on the amendment? All the All those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 44, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. We are back on the bill. Senate File 44, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Senate File 52, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 52, Insurance, Mental Health, and Substance Use Parity.
There are no amendments. Any discussion on the bill? Having Senate File 52, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 79, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 79, Medicaid Billing for School-Based Services.
There aren't, Senator Rothus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Without objection, I'd ask that this bill be laid back for 1 additional day so we can consider possible amendments.
Are there objections? Without objection, Senate File 79 will be laid back for 1 day. Senate File 82, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 82, Local Impact Assistance Payments.
There are amendments. Would the reading clerk read in the amendments?
Senate File 82, second reading amendment number 1, page 4, line 5, after.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 82 and ask for the body's favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, all that this does when it goes in and amends the bill when we're talking about the Industrial Siting Council and its ability to mitigate impacts for these large industrial projects. Just further clarification to make sure that the legislative intent is absolutely clear, that there's a reference saying that the Industrial Siting Council may consider the population of the cities and counties which are affected by this development. The intent we learned on the floor was to include and make sure they consider any disproportionately impacts on smaller communities, but it doesn't really say exactly what they're supposed to consider when it comes to population. So all that this does is it clarifies why I understand the intent to be. Obviously, the smaller the community, the less able they are to deal with any of the smallest influx in population from workers that may be working on these projects or the actual physical impacts on their infrastructure caused by heavier traffic, for example. So I think it's an important concept that we give the Industrial Siting Council clear direction. Point out that this entire new language is permissive. There's a may, not a shall. So still striking a good balance between providing direction, but allowing for decision-making on a case-by-case basis with the council. I hope that you can support this amendment.
Discussion on the amendment or questions? Seeing none, this is on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 82. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the amendment has passed. Reading clerk reading the next amendment.
Senate File 82, second reading amendment number 2, page 3, line 17, reinsert.
Senator Hicks, you've been busy. Please explain.
Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 82. Would ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the arts of crafting good legislation is the art of compromise and trying to find oftentimes where we can accomplish both goals. And we had quite a robust discussion yesterday about how much we should put. That was, if you remember the discussion within the existing bill, Senate File 82, there's really 2 components in there. And one component was to provide more guidance to the Industrial Siting Council for laying out what's an eligible expenditure. The second part of the discussion was were the current cuts proposed in the bill equitable? And Mr. President, I hate to admit this, but yesterday I might have exaggerated just a little bit on the level of cuts. It's not because I was trying to exaggerate, it's because I never majored in mathematics, Mr. President. My colleague here is wondering about math in Baggs, Wyoming, but actually I'm a byproduct of the Park County School District. and the University of Wyoming and Northwest College. So it just goes to show you, Mr. President, that even with all of that studious academic learning I had, I could still make mistakes. So the actual cut is 28%. Let me walk you through the amendment. It's still a substantial reduction in the eligible funding for those cities, towns, and counties that would be eligible for industrial siting. So what the amendment does is going to try to strike that balance. And so for those smaller projects, it creates 2.76% is eligible. Keep in mind, not all of that may be awarded by the Industrial Siting Council. So you would assume that if there's a project that has a cost between 350 million and 550 million, 2.76 would adequately cover that. Then we have a graduated scale. So as those projects get increasingly more expensive, we reduce the amount of eligible fund because the total amount of money still goes up, but that puts more money back in the state's coffers. And so we have a graduated scale with 3 steps here. At 2.76% from 350 million to 550 million. 2.25% would be eligible for distribution for projects under industrial siding that run from 550 million to 725 million. And then lastly, any of those projects from 725 to $1 billion would be 1.75%. I would ask for your favorable consideration, Mr. President, and I would stand for any questions.
Questions for the sponsor and discussion? Senator Perkins.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions and some information for the body that relates to this amendment as well as our discussion yesterday. There's just a couple of things that weren't mentioned yesterday that I wanted to make sure that the Senate was aware as we vote on this bill. The first of all, as we talk about this process and the Industrial Siting Commission process, I think it's important for the members to understand, Mr. President, where this money comes from. This is not money that's paid by the applicant. This is money, this is a direct distribution from the general fund to the local community to do this. Then when we talk about, what does this mean? We talk about this whether it's 2.76 that was in the original bill and now it's being, we've got this compromise from the good vice president. We can tell you from the testimony that we had that this is what this 2.75 or whatever this percentage is based upon the estimated material costs for the project at the time of permitting. At the time that they actually make the application for the permit, it's still very early in the process. They don't really get down to the nitty gritty on the planning until later, and they know it's going to be approved. And so as you make that, you know, if you're going to if you're going to have $1 billion of material project on this project, that's what is at the beginning. Once that permit's awarded, it may or may not have $1 billion of material costs. It may only have $500 million of material costs if ultimately they change the project or change the scope or something changes and it happens. There may be nothing that comes out of the project because ultimately, even though the permit's approved, the project may not ever eventually be built. Or of course, it could be they could spend more than what they originally estimated in the application. Regardless of how that turns out, the state is paying out of the general fund that amount to these communities as awarded by the ISC. So this is the ISC is writing checks directly off of the state general fund to do this. Now, why would we do that? Well, we had that discussion yesterday. There's a lot of impacts. There's a lot of things that happen out there that communities may or may not be able to deal with. And so they need that assistance. The other side of it is to some degree, Mr. President, it's a bit like betting on the come line. If you're in Las Vegas, you set that out and you see if you roll those dice and see if it comes up. And ultimately the concept is that with sales tax or property tax or other things that the that the state will recoup that, will recoup that over time. And so it's a great, it's a good investment on behalf of the state and also support the local communities. So there's no question, but I just want to think it's important for you to know that this is not just ethereal money. This is money that comes out of the general fund that pays for everything else except for K through 12. The other thing that, the testimony we had from the IFC, the person who heads that up from DEQ, was that the average over the last while has been 1.65% is what's been awarded. So even though you can do the math and find out it's a 28% reduction in the total amount, in reality, they haven't been awarding, for the most part, at least on the average, they haven't been awarding the 2.765. They haven't been awarding the 2% that is in the bill as it currently stands. And so as you look at that, I think it's important for you to have that information. So when we talk about cuts, you know, I'm just reminded of, I think it was Samuel Clemens that said there's three kinds of, we talk about that, there's three kinds of statistics. There's lies, there's damned lies, and there's statistics. And so we always got to be careful about how we, when we throw out numbers, and we all do that. And I do appreciate the vice president bringing that. And you look at this may be, you know, this is certainly that. And again, at the end of the day, it's still subject to the debate and the discussion and the award of the ISC. But I just wanted you to know what we do is we allow the ISC to write those checks right off the state's general fund. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion follow-up. Any more discussion for the sponsor? Questions? Senator Hicks, follow-up then.
Mr. President, just follow up with some of the previous discussion. First, let me talk about the distribution from the general fund, where that number comes from, that 2.76%. That's the state's share of the sales tax distribution. And so when we have a sales tax, some of that stays at the local level, some of it comes back to the state. So that's the origins of the 2.76%. So the Industrial Siting Council goes out there and they say, look, to help these communities that are going to have significant impacts, the state is going to use our portion of the sales tax to offset that and provide that to those local communities. So that's where the 2.76 comes from. It would normally flow into the general fund, but it's intercepted and then put back out there, or we upfront those costs and it's backfilled back with those sales tax. But more importantly, I think it's important because Mr. Chairman of our Appropriations Committee is right. If you look at the recent history, it's 1.65%. But it's exactly right when he talks about the use of statistics. Like when I took statistics, I had a professor that actually said it a little more blunt, but I won't go into that, Mr. Chairman. So why is it 1.65%? So I want you to flip your bill open, go to page 6, go to line 20, Romanet 2. Expenses for which a county, city, or town previously receiving an impact assistance payment, unless the county, city, or town can demonstrate the expenses are new or ongoing. This codifies the current practice that already goes on. And so if you will look to where all of these things have been happening in these industrial siting rooms, almost all of them are wind projects. And they've been phased in over the last 5 or 6 years. So what's happened early on with the first wind project, there was a distribution of 2.5 to 2.76%. But because this is already the current practice of the Industrial Siting Council, as another project has come online, they've said, well, you've already been mitigated for these additional costs to your county roads. We've provided additional ambulance service. We've provided additional law enforcement. So they said, we are not going to award that 2.765% because you've already been mitigated. So effectively, what happens is they reduce that. And that's why there's 1.65%, is because they've already mitigated some of those. This bill doesn't solely deal with those scenarios. So we know we've got several of these and counties that have not had large industrial projects, that much of the impacts have already been impacted. If you don't adopt this, what you've effectively done saying, look, you guys get 2% for the very first industrial project that you're going to get in your county. And you may or may not be fully mitigated associated with those impacts. That's where the 1.65 comes from, because we paid out so much in 2014 and too much and paid out in 2016. A lot of those have already been mitigated. A new project comes on in 2020, they don't award the 2.76. They've awarded 1.5 or 1.4 or whatever that is. That's where that 1.65 number comes from. You go to a brand new project in an area that has not had an industrial siding project, I will almost guarantee you that it's going to be more cost than the 1.65% that's been paid out recently in those projects. So again, numbers matter, how you get the numbers and the statistics, but that's why currently you look at the 1.65 and that's where that comes from. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cole. That was your second time. I apologize, Senator Cole. That is. Yes. So we're ready for a vote. We're on second reading number 2 to Senate File 82. All those in favor? On the amendment, we are second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 82. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment. Those opposed? Oh, wanted division. Oh, we have one on the, yeah, Senator Case, we're putting you on an aye out there and driving across the state. No. Great hand language. Just keep that hand language just at that. Anderson is an aye, Case is a no. We'll adjust to this. Do we have a division? All those in favor stand. Yes, all those aye stand. You don't stand, Senator Anderson, you just hold your hand up. Okay, those opposed, stand. Case is driving and indicating. (14 yes, 16 no). The amendment has failed. Senator Rothfuss?
I'm not sure you're coming through the speakers at all.
Okay. 16-14, the amendment has failed. Is that better? Does that work?
Mr. President, it did come through, but it's still very quiet, even when
Quiet.
you were speaking directly into it.
We
And I
can
think
have some
that's
adjustments.
Part of the problem that
I had a
folks
tune-up
are
on my
experiencing.
speaker yesterday. Maybe you can have a tune-up on yours. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President.
I will lean in close as Senator Landon counseled. The amendment has passed. We are back on failed. Excuse me. The Senate file has failed. We are back on the Senate File 82. Having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Absent objection, it is so ordered. All right. Concludes our second readings. We're at that point of consideration of bills. Senate File 88. There it is. Okay. Senate, we got one more to go. Senate File 88, with the reading clerk read in the Senate file.
Senate File 88, ownership of fossils and artifacts.
There are no amendments. Senate File 88, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. That concludes our second readings. Consideration of bills on general file. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business, consideration of bills on general file.
Mr. President, I move the Senate resolve itself to the committee of the whole.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carried. Senator Kinski, you have the honors today.
Thank you. Committee of the whole will come to order. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 40. The clerk will please read the bill. Oh, excuse me. Senate File 34. Clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 34, Born Alive Infant Means of Care, an act relating to public health and safety, sponsored by Senator Steinmetz. Was referred to committee number 10, with return to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Bouchard, Furphy, Hutchings, and McEwen. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 34 do pass. And for explanation of that bill, I would pass this baton off to the person who sits 6 feet away from me on the floor, many hundreds of miles away from me in Goshen County, my neighbor to the direct east.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for considering Senate File 34, Born Alive Infant Means of Care. While we may have spirited debates on the floor about when life begins and how pregnancy affects both the rights of the mother and child, it is my hope that we can all agree that once a child is born alive, all rights apply equally under the law. We have seen evidence this last year in Wyoming that we will go to extreme measures to save just one human life. This has been exemplified in measures taken to fight COVID-19. Today, I'm asking you to consider Senate File 34, which seeks to refine language currently in statute in order to clarify the means of medical care for an infant who survives an abortion and is born alive. As many of you will remember, this bill is an old friend as legislation passed overwhelmingly last year in 2020. I would contend this bill is even more important in 2021. Going to the bill, the changes start on page 1. The commonly accepted means of care that would be rendered to any other infant born alive shall be employed in the treatment of any viable infant aborted alive. Any physician performing an abortion shall take medically appropriate and reasonable steps to preserve the life and health of an infant born alive. In closing, I would leave you with this thought from our Wyoming Constitution in Article 1, Section 2, Equality of All. In their inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all members of the human race are equal. Thank you for your consideration, and I would stand for any question.
Discussion on the bill. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I do have a question, and it really wasn't necessarily provided in detail during the explanation of the bill. So I would ask precisely what this bill does. I mean, it's a restructuring of the language in some ways. In other ways, there might be specific implications, there might not. And I struggle as I read it to understand specific cases where outcomes would be changed. So I would ask proponents of the bill to describe circumstances, if they can, examples of, based on how the bill is written today, things would transpire, versus with the bill in place, how things would transpire and in what circumstances there would be differences. I have heard some people say that they didn't think that the bill made any significant changes. I've heard others, Mr. Chairman, that say that it would change a great deal. And so I'd like to hear from proponents an interpretation of how they think things would be different if this bill were put into law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Further comments, questions, or discussion on the bill? Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the good question. We basically designate that the person performing the abortion would take medically appropriate and reasonable steps to preserve the life and health of an infant born alive. That's what this bill basically does. We know that this does happen. There are several instances of people who have survived abortions and live to tell about it. Our state is fairly weak in our protections, so this just tightens up that language, identifies who would take that appropriate step, and that we would be giving the means of care that would be rendered to any other infant born alive. So we are not just treating infants aborted alive in a different manner. So that's simply what we're doing, and I would appreciate your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Senator. Further questions or discussions on the bill? Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still am having trouble seeing where this law changes anything. I didn't hear an example of where in any case specifically a doctor does not treat a live person as a live person. If a person's alive, they would, by their Hippocratic oath, are bound to do that. So how does this change that? How does this change that? Where's that viability concept I'm missing?
Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. I think I can actually support this bill maybe, but my question is this. I was a friend of a young lady that essentially the baby had to be induced because it had died in utero, and in order to save the mother's life, they had to induce and take the baby so that the mother didn't become septic. Another time, we had a situation where my wife delivered a child with severe brain defects that had no brain. Another time, a baby was delivered without a heart. And lots of different birth defects that we see when you have a hospital that has 700 births a year. And my issue is that how are we going to treat those? What is your response to those individual instances that actually have happened just in the last 2 years, in the last 12 months? So I would like to know the answers on that, please.
Further discussion. Senator McCune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a key word in this bill that we're missing. It's viable. I would say a baby born without a heart or without a brain is not a viable life. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we don't think across the nation, they're not harvesting babies and baby parts. And we're just trying to get out ahead of it. I understand it probably hasn't happened here. But why don't we stop it from happening here before it does? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I don't know that my confusion has been resolved, but maybe it won't be, which is fine. in terms of what this does differently, because I see it as a bill that either does nothing or potentially does something bad with regard to the viability aspect. And getting to the good senator from Campbell County's question about birth defects and circumstances where you have a case where there wouldn't be viability in the absence of the support that's received in the hospital through a respirator, through other devices, where as I potentially read the existing statute, I think the understanding based on the language that's in the text is there would have to be that viability in current statute independent survival, some chance of independent survival. And either this bill mitigates that, which gets to the circumstances that were raised by the senator from Campbell County, where you would have an obligation to utilize extreme measures and maintain the life through a series of devices when there's no possibility that there'll be survival beyond the use of those devices. There'll be no independent brain activity, no thoughts, no independence, no individualism, because brain development may be the problem, something along those lines. Is there then an obligation in this proposal to change that and to make sure that there is an obligation for the doctor to continue using every means possible to maintain the life, even though the life will always be dependent upon the equipment and there will be no independence? Is that new? Is that what's changing here? Is that the intent? And if not, again, I don't know what's different. So either it does nothing or it does something, in my opinion, that seems to perpetuate a circumstance that would be painful to the family in a way that doesn't respect that family's remorse and circumstances and their challenges, and it doesn't leave the choice to them. And we know from our Wyoming Constitution, we know from Section 39 of Article 1 that that's supposed to be a choice between the family and the patients, and it's not supposed to be a choice of the Wyoming legislature. So I'm still either not understanding what's new here, or it seems that we're intruding in a place where government doesn't belong. So again, Mr. Chairman, if I could understand a little better what the intent here is.
Senator Boner.
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Beitman.
Hey,
You know, these young guys all look the same.
there's a joke to be had there, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not gonna go there. So anyhow, back to this important bill and the debate. I think what we're missing here is very simple. We have seen numerous accounts of failed abortions where the doctors and the nurses on scene have stood there and let a baby die on the table. That's what this bill does. This bill says if that baby is born and it survives an abortion, you got to take every steps necessary to preserve that baby's life. It's a human being. And that's what we're doing here. Nothing more, nothing less. Means of care that would be rendered to any other infant born alive. That's the difference between the current statute and what we're talking about here. So let's keep all that in mind. Imagine a baby that just survived an abortion laying there on a table with a doctor and nurses not doing anything. That's what this bill's about. And I support this bill. Thank you.
Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question. This is, this is always a very troubling subject matter. But my question is an honest question today, and that's looking at this new language on page 2 about any physician performing an abortion shall take medically appropriate and reasonable steps to preserve the life and health of an infant born alive. And as I look at that, my question is this: as we talk about the effective language and what words mean, is this ensuring the fact that all the doctor does is make sure the infant is not born alive? That before it leaves the womb, that it's not alive? Is that will that be the effective? Is that the honest question? Will this be the effect? Is just make sure that the infant doesn't survive, and so that the medical professional is not in this quandary. And so, our honest question is that, I know that's not the intent, but as I read that, is that what is an unintended consequence or an unintended result of the language in the bill?
Further discussion. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the proponents of the bill. Some good thoughts. I agree with my colleague from Natrona County, always a troubling subject for me. But I do represent a district with lots and lots of healthcare providers. So I did have just a thought or two, maybe a question following on to my friend from Albany County. So does this change anything with regard to the parents' ability to be involved in this situation? That's number one. And then the second piece is, how does the word viable in this language come into play? So described by my good friend, perhaps a baby is not viable, for example, without extreme use of all the help we can give the little one. I'm just trying to formulate exactly what all we're talking about here. I don't want to get in the way of the parents' ability to interact with that doctor, whatever. So those two questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the ability to speak on this matter. Just a couple things. Our Declaration of Independence states really clear that governments were instituted to secure our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And governments were instituted to do that. So governments do have a right to speak on behalf of children born alive. And I'd like to take you to the Constitution, where it was mentioned that in Article 1, Section 38, the right of healthcare access, that each competent adult shall have the right to make his or her own healthcare decisions. At this stage, this isn't an adult. We do need someone, the government or the healthcare provider or the parent, someone to step in and help this child. I think we're being thrown a lot of we're being taken down a path that we don't need to go in respect to this bill. We're talking about babies that someone either didn't want or for some healthcare reason they couldn't. Well, I guess they didn't want them, because if you look at a healthcare reason for abortion, there may be a reason to abort a child. It won't be viable. But in this case, we're saying if a child survives an abortion and they're born alive, all the bill is asking is that they be given not every means of care necessary, but that they should be rendered the means of healthcare that is rendered should be the same for any other child born alive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to try to address some of the concerns from my colleagues from Natrona County about, is this going to result in unintended consequences from somebody actually trying to, let's say, kill the fetus? I think that's the purpose of the abortion to begin with. That's exactly what they're trying to do. And they botched it. And now you have a live fetus. That's the question. The intent is not to have a live fetus, so it doesn't change that. That's not an unintended circumstance. That's exactly what they're trying to do. But more importantly, Mr. Chairman, there's been a couple of references here to the Wyoming Constitution, but I want to read for you Article 1, Section 38, which my colleague from Laramie County here has already referenced. But I want to take you to subsection C because I think it addresses my colleague from the Ivory Towers' concerns about what's the right role of government. Article 1, Section 38, subsection C. The legislature may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on the rights granted under this section to protect the health, general welfare of the people, or to accomplish the other purposes set forth in the Wyoming Constitution. It is our job, folks. That's what the Constitution says, is to make reasonable applications. Right there. That's our job. If you don't want to follow the Constitution, vote against it.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Dockstetter.
I can defer to the minority floor leader if you'd like.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the help on clarifying some of my questions. And it gets back to the root of viability is what I'm hearing. And that helps me to understand the intent, because the scenario that was laid out was all the ones that I've heard so far are scenarios of a viable, independent, surviving fetus that has been aborted, but now is again continuing to be viable. So a question I would have then for the sponsors is why viable is not present in the second sentence, the new one that's produced, where rather than preserve the life and health of an infant born alive, it would be a viable infant born alive, which I believe would then be consistent with the title of this particular paragraph. And then it would also appropriately relate to 356102, which is no abortion after viability, and be more internally consistent. Because I think some of the folks that are reading this language are concerned that the second sentence there does not do what was described and goes quite a bit further beyond viability. The concerns that I've heard, Mr. Chairman, are certainly more towards the non-viable circumstances where you have a birth defect or some other challenge where we're talking 3-month age, non-viability, and abortion that is tragic, is not what the family wanted, for example, but it is not a viable circumstance. And there's an expectation that it will exacerbate the tragedy for that family where there is no viable future, and they're making a hard and tragic choice. And then that hard and tragic choice gets worse because that fetus is, while not independently viable, is capable of having its life sustained through the equipment that is present, through machines, and will never become viable. So I guess my question then to the proponents is if there would be support for the word viable between, or at the end there, and health of a viable infant born alive. Thank you.
Senator Anderson, my apologies if I passed over you. Senator Anderson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have passed over me, but I waved my hand instead of just putting it up. So thank you very much. I just need to add to the discussion I recently was in a life and death situation in a hospital. And if they had decided not to pursue every possible medical process, I could have died easily. But because I had insurance and they could pursue it, they did. They operated on New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve and saved my life. Now, if I'd have been one of those infants that nobody did anything for, I would have laid there and died. So we can have it on both ends. This bill is just talking about the start of life. I am for this bill. This bill would say that you don't just let them lay there and die. 45 years ago, a close friend of mine worked in an OBGYN in a Wyoming hospital, and the doctor didn't want it on his hands that he killed the infant. So he just put him in a separate room and let him die. And of course, she couldn't stand that and had to quit. But that's what they do, is they just they aren't responsible for them dying. So I commend this. 45 years later, we can give some assistance to some of those babies that need assistance, not necessarily for a brain injury or something like that, but just for the natural course of life. So on and for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Further discussions? Senator Dockstetter.
Thank you. Just a note before I speak to the bill, we found out our problem with the speakers that you were concerned about and having a hard time hearing. We turned everything down for the state of the state this morning, and that's why it was a little quiet. We got it all turned back up, and I think you can hear now.
Did you say something?
Test. Here we go. Now let's change the tone a little bit. You know, I've been through a lot of these bills, similar bills and two, and chambers always get a little quiet, a little more tension. That's kind of the case now. I'll wait just a second. These are difficult topics. I hear that those who are in the medical care business, those who, I have friends who are professionals, and it's a concern. I know where they come from. But what I come down to is I look at this and say, okay, maybe it's a little switch of a word, addressing our minority floor leader, and maybe he needs to speak to the prime sponsor and adjust it that way. But I kind of wonder, what kind of society have we come down to when we can't protect the life of an infant? Look at the words, page 2. Performing an abortion, reasonable steps to preserve life and the health of an infant born alive. Think about that. How important is it in our society to protect life? All the more important as a grandfather. I hold new infants, soon to be 13 of them, and love them and tell them how much it means to have them in our family. Why we can't just take this reasonable step to protect the life of an infant child. On and for the bill.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, I respect all of these views, and I understand that every view voiced is a view out of compassion and empathy and kindness and love. I mean, there's nothing but that being expressed here. I understand that. And it's the same place that I come from when I contemplate the circumstances of that individual that has a tragic outcome where they don't have a viable life ahead of what they hoped would be their next child. And so my question gets back
again, and I would like to hear from the proponents about the possibility of adding viable to that last sentence, because I think the sentence reads very differently with the word viable there. I think if we're talking about a fetus that becomes an infant that has a propensity to then lead a healthy life and a viable life, again, that reads very differently from those tragic circumstances where a doctor might feel compelled to take all possible measures, all extraordinary measures to save the life and preserve the life of a fetus that will not be able to live on its own, that does not have a performing brain function, a heart. We're getting to the point where our doctors can do extraordinary things. But sometimes those extraordinary things lead to more pain. And when you're thinking about that family and those individuals that are in a situation where they know things aren't going to work out, and they know that this is not a child they're going to be able to take home with them, and nobody will. And the doctor would potentially have to say, I'm sorry, but the state of Wyoming and the legislature requires that I do everything necessary to sustain the life of this non-viable fetus, which we can do because science is excellent. We really do an amazing job now. That's the concern that I've heard primarily. So again, I asked the proponents if the word viable in that last sentence is acceptable, because it certainly changes it in a manner that I believe would assuage a lot of the concerns that I have heard. Thank you, and thanks everyone for the very good debate, the strong sentiment, which I do understand, and I appreciate the debate from the prime sponsor, and I'll call for the question after the answer. Thank you.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for the great debate. This is a very important topic, and I'm glad that we could talk about the life of babies and where we stand on this issue. And so I won't belabor the point because I think we have a philosophical difference on this issue. And so I would just call for the question and ask for your favorable aye vote.
Ready for the question? All right, all those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 34, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Senate File 34 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 83. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 83, Gillette Community College College District, an act relating to community college districts, sponsored by Senator Wasserberger, was referred to committee number 4, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Bateman, Ellis, Rothfuss, Salazar, and Scott. Senator Scott, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I move from the Committee of the Whole rise and report it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 83 do pass. Mr. Chairman, there was no standing committee amendment, and I yield to Senator Wasserberger, sponsor of the bill.
Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and move the standing committee amendment at this time and then talk us through that standing committee amendment. So
Senator Scott.
I'm going to move the bill.
Committee of the Whole amendment.
Committee of the Whole.
So we'll have to have it read in. And then
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Will the reading clerk please read the amendment?
Senate File 83, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 3, delete.
Senator Wasserberger.
Mr. Chairman, I move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 83 and would ask for your favorable support. Mr. Chairman, this amendment is to create a system that would allow Gillette College to become an independent community college after a positive vote by the community itself. And so essentially what this does is, as you walk through the bill, on page 1, lines 3 and 4, we strike that part of the introduction and we insert new language stating specifying requirements of the transition to a new district. And then, Mr. Chairman, we move down to page 2, line 15. And on page 2, line 15, after 2118-312, we insert and subject to the subsection C of this section. And then finally on page 3, lines 1 through 9, we delete that entire paragraph. I am told we don't need that paragraph to protect the employees at Gillette College because they will be with Sheridan College until accreditation is approved. And so that language comes out, and then we insert on the amendment on page 1 at line 14, we insert C, which essentially says, upon approval by the Gillette College Community College, by the electors, the following shall apply to the formation of the Gillette College Community College District and the transition from Northern Wyoming Community College. And so it sets up a process and allows the Wyoming Community College Commission to essentially referee the situation and keep everything fair. And so at line 20, we continue with little I, and essentially the boards of Gillette College and the Community College District and the Northern Wyoming Community College District shall jointly adopt a plan. So they will sit down, they will write a plan on the transition of students, employees, and other services or functions from the Northern Wyoming Community College District. And at the bottom of that paragraph, it talks about it will be based on actual demonstrated expenses by the Northern Wyoming Community College District or other applicable entities related to the transition. And then the next paragraph, 2 little I, the Community College Commission shall review the plan adopted under paragraph 1 of this subject section, any agreements necessary to implement the plan and the budgets of the community college districts to ensure that the transition process adequately protects the interests of students and is consistent with the statewide strategic plan. And so the Wyoming Community College Commission develops a statewide community plan that they follow every year. And so that plan from Gillette College and Sheridan College must mimic that and follow that in various different ways. Okay, so then we move on to paragraph 3 little I. During each year of the transition period under this subsection, Northern Wyoming Community College District shall continue to receive the allocation for both districts. And so how that works is the Wyoming Community College Commission determines how much money should flow to the 7 community college districts. So the money that flows to Northern Wyoming Community College Commission will still be the same amount of money until ultimately, if Gillette College is approved in a voters, the electorate approves them, and then finally moves through the accreditation process. Once the accreditation process is complete, then that money would begin flowing to Gillette College. Okay, so the money still goes to Sheridan College. And Mr. Chairman, that is the amendment, and I think it's an excellent amendment. I worked closely with the good member of Sheridan County that sits on the Education Committee on this amendment. And so I stand for questions on the amendment.
Discussion on the amendment. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, the question I have on the amendment, when we go to subsection C, lines 14 through 18, and this is where it goes in, it says the approval of the Gillette College or Community College District by the electors. My question is that the approval of the district or is it the approval of the mill levy to fund the district?
Sorry, I have to believe, okay, Senator Wasserberger.
Well, that's a little bit different question and really doesn't impact this amendment, but the answer is simply this. I handed out to you some papers about Gillette College. You have those in your inbox and I assigned for each one of those. But here's how it works, Senator, since you asked. The money flows to Sheridan College, Northern Wyoming Community College District. If the voters approve the election, at that point in time, at the same time, the trustees will run for those positions. There'll be 7 positions. So there'll be the ballot on what the mill levy is, and it will say up to 4 mills. Okay? According to a recent Attorney General's informal letter, they have said, the AG's office has said that Campbell County can levy less than 4 mills. Okay, and as everybody knows, if we compared Sheridan College mill levy, they levy all 5. They are a community college district. They levy 5 mills. They get about $500,000 per mill for that. So they get $2.5 million on all 5 mills. Okay, right now, if Campbell County assess 2 mills, or one, let's say we do 1 mill, our assessed valuation is $4.2 billion. That's $4.2 million. Okay, so we really only need to assess $2 million to cover the state appropriation from Wyoming Community College Commission. If we do that, we will return that $4.6 million back to the Community College Commission, and that money can be, well, first of all, the Good Appropriations Chair, and we can't promise anything in the future, but it will be to the legislature that decides what to do with that money. If the legislature decides, okay, let's divide that 4.6 million up, it would be about $610,000 to the 7 other community colleges that they would increase funding. If the Appropriations Committee says, no, we're going to cut that, they can do that too. That is down the road. How far down the road is that? The election takes place. The Board of Trustees takes their position. Gillette College cannot become an independent community college until it is fully accredited. Right now, Gillette College is fully accredited under Northern Wyoming Community College Commission. It has to earn its own accreditation. In the best case scenario, accreditation takes at least 2 years, probably 5 years. Okay? The minute Gillette College becomes an accredited college under what's called the Higher Learning Commission, it would become an independent community college. And so at that point in time, the mill levy can kick in when the board votes it in. Okay? And then the mill levy takes a full year for that revenue stream to start showing up at your college. So that's a real complicated thing on the accreditation and how it works. And so we are back on the amendment.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, back on the amendment. Mr. Chairman, and I can see why they referred to it several times, a standing committee amendment, though it technically is a committee of the whole amendment. Mr. Chairman, what happened in the standing committee, and we had an extensive hearing on this particular bill, and we did it via Zoom. Became apparent that there was some issues in the transition process. And the key ones related to the accreditation issue. And the accreditation issue is important to the students. You've got a college there right now. It's a branch of Northern Wyoming Community College. It's in Gillette. And it has a number of students there. They're taking programs, getting a community college degree that is accredited, getting, I presume like they're like all the rest of them, some certificate programs and whatnot from an accredited institution, or taking some courses they need for this, that, or the other reason. The accreditation is important for those students in getting the full value out of the education that they're getting as they go out into the world of work, or proceed further with their education. And the testimony was that this was going to be a bit of a slow and complicated procedure. You needed to keep the existing operation viable during that procedure. Got some complications with how the funding flows to do that. And you can't just say, okay, we've decided to have a new college and we change over and they're automatically accredited. No, you have to go through these national organizations that do that. And there were some issues there. It became quite apparent, Mr. Chairman, that, and I think the president of the Northern Wyoming Community College expressed it very well. Somebody made a remark that it sounded like we were refereeing a messy divorce. And he said no. He said he would much prefer to look at it as that we were in the process of giving birth to a new college. And I thought that was a much more positive attitude. And it sounded to me like there was opportunity for working out a reasonable compromise between the parent college and the new one that would protect the interests of the students and would protect the financial interests of the state. And frankly, I think they have done that here. And I strongly urge the Senate to adopt it. You know, this is the potential here is for a row between the two. I think they've got the right referee in this amendment. I think they've got partners that are willing to work out the details as they come up. And, you know, this is the art of good legislation, compromise. And so I strongly urge the Senate to adopt the amendment.
Thank you. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, this was a concern that I had as we heard the testimony in the hearing, is how do we provide that level of assurance to students? And so I think that our students deserve to have some clarity to know how that process of their credits being transferred is going to be one that works out. And so while there might be a lot of concerns about the bill, the process, you know, is there a better way of doing it? I have all those concerns as well, but this is definitely a positive step forward for this legislation. So I'd urge your favorable vote.
Further discussion on the amendment. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I do have one question, and my apologies if I just missed it in the explanation, but I'm trying to follow how this works. And overall, I think this is a better process. But when we get to the Romanet 3 phase of the amendment as proposed, where the community college district, the Northern Wyoming Community College District shall continue to receive the allocation for both districts from the funding allocation prior to accreditation, and only after accreditation do things really separate. What is the situation with the mill levy for Campbell County during that time after the passage of the creation of the community college district, but before accreditation? What happens with the mill levy if we pass this amendment? I don't know that I understand that. And maybe that was, my apologies if you already said that, good senator from Campbell County, but I don't know the answer. So.
Further discussion. Further discussion. Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I don't know the answer, and so I'm going to speculate on that issue, because as the issue goes, the Campbell County Commissioners will choose the ballot language, and that is actually in statute. And so they don't have any real choice on what that says. And you can read that in statute. And then people can apply to be trustees, and then there's an election on the trustees. You could actually have an election where the voters don't approve the community college, but you have people getting elected to it, but they don't have a job because the vote went down. But if it passes both, then, as I understand it, the new community college, the Gillette Community College, their Board of Trustees would set the mill levy. That mill levy, revenue does not come in from it for 12 months. Okay? But we would also be receiving allocation of funds to Northern Wyoming Community College. And until Gillette is completely accredited and it passes that, you kind of have two funds going on at the same time. So there's a little bit of conflict there. So I guess I would say if I was a Board of Trustees member, your mill levy might be lower because you've got this other money coming in. Plus you have also, we're going to talk about later, some local funds coming in to Gillette College. And then once we separate, I would suspect maybe that mill levy goes up a little bit more. But what your question was, is what do I see in the future? Right now, $4.2 billion is our assessed valuation. We have been told we have kind of a Craig group in Gillette that decides how much our assessed valuation will be next year. We are anticipating a 25% drop in our assessed valuation, that we will go down to about $3.6 billion. That's not a concern for this floor. I don't believe that the way we have it figured right now, the entire assessed valuation of Campbell County would have to drop by 80% before state funds would step back in and have to fund us. And I'm going to tell this floor, if Campbell County's assessed valuation drops by 80%, you're not going to be worried about little old Gillette College. You're going to be worried about what's going to happen to K-12 funding. You're going to be worried about what's happening to your university. So that's a speculative answer to a question that I really couldn't answer. I don't know what the answer is.
Further discussion. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to offer to the good senator, I think I was a lot younger there, but I did go up to Gillette one night and did a ball game between Sheridan and Gillette. My stripes might be a little tighter right in through here, but I do still have my shirt and would offer to help the Community College Commission to referee that ball game if you need me. So thank you.
Discussion on the amendment, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to know for informational purposes, because we have a problem in our county where our county is paying for a school that's in the next county. And I think, and they don't have any mill levy on their county, but we're paying it. So, I mean, if we were in the same situation, I'd be saying, well, how do we get back the money that we paid and we're going to give that college to someone else? Well, I'm just curious because in this scenario, it seems to me Sheridan is paying for it. And I'm trying to figure out what do they get out of it other than just getting out of the deal. So somewhere that levy money is already coming from another county. Because I don't think Campbell County is paying for it. So I'm just curious about what's going on here.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take a stab at a couple of questions that came up regarding this amendment. Going back, way back to the good senator from Baggs's question about what does the ballot look like? In 21-18-312 formation of districts, it gives the language of what the ballot shall say. And it'll say, shall a community college district be created and established according to law encompassing blank, enter Campbell, in this case, Campbell County, within the proposed community college district to be known as whatever the good senator from across the Powder River calls Gillette College, community college district for the operation and maintenance of a community college to be located at Gillette, Wyoming, in this case. And shall there be levied a special tax not to exceed 4 mils on the dollar of taxable valuation within the district for the operation and maintenance of said community college. So you're getting two questions in that ballot proposition. Do you want the college and do you want to be taxed up to 4 mils? And what the good senator from Campbell County was saying, they don't need 4 mils. They're only looking at 1 or 2. And that'll be up to the local district. If this were to pass, the local district would be formed. They would set the mill levy. So that should answer that question. And I would assume, and like the other senator said, we don't know how this kicks in. Does the mill levy kick in immediately upon this passing, if it were to pass? I think the answer is yes. And I think that money would start to accrue in the pot, along with other local taxes, fees, tuition, everything else that's generated locally in Gillette will stay in Gillette up to accreditation. Sheridan College will continue to get the state share. And once the accreditation happens, that's where the cliff and the separation is. And that's where the breakup is final. And to the good senator from Campbell County, it's not you, it's me. Breakups are hard to do. Let's get it on. Thank you. Vote aye on the amendment.
Further discussion, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that on third reading, on second reading, we might need language that clarifies explicitly what the good senator from Sheridan County said, because I don't know that it has to be taken that way. And I can see some awkward ways where I as a trustee of the new community college district could say, well, the state's paying money to Northwest College right now that's sufficient, so I'll set the mill levy here at 0. And we'll let the state pay for it for as long as we can, and then we'll kick it back up to our 2 mills afterwards. I don't see why that can't be done right now, so maybe that's a great second reading amendment, but I do think that the detail provided in this amendment is better than it was before. So I too shall support the amendment, and maybe we need just a little tweaking. Thank you.
Further discussion, or are you ready for the question on the amendment? Question on the amendment. All those in favor, Senator Wasserberger's motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 83, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Back on the bill. Senator Steinmetz, could you take the chair for a moment?
Okay, just one moment while I figure this system out, everyone. Get my mouse. Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Folks, I have a message for this body from the President of the United States. President Biden to Wyoming, drop dead. To all our other economic troubles, we now have an administration in Washington that is determined to shut us down. And if there was ever a time when we should set aside parochial concerns or local concerns and work together as a state, this is it. And we were on our way to doing that. A task force for the viability of our community college system had been appointed. The community colleges approached the Joint Appropriations Committee last January and said, we've been cut, approaching now with the phase 2, phase 3, over $50 million since 2010. We cannot pay for the 7 districts we have now. And those colleges are critical to the future of our economic diversification. The mission of the community colleges, founded after World War II, was to take tail gunners and turn them into welders, to take machinists first class and turn them into machinists world class. And if we do not have a viable community college system, that cannot happen. That transition to the new Wyoming cannot happen. So we had a task force that was going to look at this mess that we have for a community college system. And we have a couple that are just teetering on the verges of not being viable anymore. We have 7 districts. We're going to go to 8. We should be looking at going to 5. Maybe we should be looking at a unified community college system. Those were the kind of things that commission was to be looking at. We have service districts. That's what Campbell County is. What is a service district? You've heard this discussion, 4 mills, 2 mills, as many mills as you need, where the money's going to stay. It is a confused hodgepodge that drives our community college system, and it needs to be completely overhauled. That was the job of the task force. And that job has been hijacked by the discussion of creating an 8th district. There is more to say about the finances. What you heard already was confusing enough, but there's another section of law which says if you want to be an accredited community college, and if you want to receive any state funding, you must assess 4 mills. There's a bill in the works to change that. And if that changes, that really upends our funding system, because right now, Sweetwater is a recapture district. Sweetwater contributes to all the other colleges. If Campbell County created a college on the same basis as all other community colleges, $18 million would be contributed to all the other community colleges in the system. The reason that Gillette is a service area of Sheridan is historically they have tried and tried and tried again. And the 4 mill levy gets voted down because 90% of it's going to come out of coal mines that are currently in bankruptcy. There was a ballot initiative 2 years ago in Campbell County to raise $0.25 cents to fund sports programs. It failed by 2-1. I don't know what the voters of Campbell County are going to do. They may or may not approve a full 4 mill levy, but there's going to be you will see another bill to change the law to say there won't be a 4 mill levy, which will hurt all of the community colleges. Now, why are we having this discussion? What happened to our task force? Why are we not debating a bill to look at the community college system overall? It was suggested in Appropriations Committee last January, maybe there should be a statewide 1 mill levy for all those community college service areas, for all those counties, 17 of them, that do not pay a 4 mill levy, but enjoy the benefits of the community college system. Why is that not the discussion we're having? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because we hit the crisis. And in addition to all the other funding cuts, the governor told the community colleges, cut 10%, be prepared to cut another 10, 20. Now, what was the response of the 7 districts? Well, it's just as varied as everybody else receiving state money. Some dithered, some procrastinated, some denied. The Board of Trustees of Sheridan College said, we are going to do the right thing because we see where this thing is ending up, right? They are closing coal mines in Campbell County. There are plans to close some of the largest coal mines in Campbell County. Our future is not bright. So they said, we are not going to exhaust our reserves. We're going to make the tough decisions. They laid people off, not vacant positions like has happened at the state. These are people I know who lost jobs. The culinary program in Sheridan wiped out. The law enforcement program in Sheridan wiped out. And also sports were eliminated. The hearing that we had in Sheridan, which Campbell County folks came to, there was not discussion about concerns about academic programs or career technical education training. It was the cancellation of the basketball. It's the Camels versus the Bronx thing that just haunts these two communities. I remember the first time I met my counterpart in the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, the mayor of Gillette, and he says, remember when you were playing for the Bronx and I was playing for the Camels? You remember that one game? I said, I don't remember any games, but none of that is important. The Bronx versus the Camels is not important. What's important is working together for the future of the state of Wyoming. So the community, what happened that night, those trustees, to their credit, they invited everybody to give input. And it was all about soccer and basketball. Would we be here today if the trustees had not eliminated sports? And is that a reason to create an 8th community college districts because they're mad because sports were eliminated? I'm mad too. I'm mad over the economic situation of the state of Wyoming. But when you get mad, you don't do your best thinking. So I'm happy for the compromise, but this bill still needs to die. We need to get back on the larger question of how do we assure the viability of the community college system in the state of Wyoming? And we don't need an 8th district. And it's a question as to whether we even need 7 districts. So thank you, members. And with that, I'll go back in the chair and hope nobody moves to divide an amendment.
Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Can I walk you through the bill? Okay, let's walk through the bill. First of all,
Senator Guru. And let me turn you on. There you go.
Point of order. Thought we had a rule in this body about using proper names. And I just want to say, I heard the last gentleman speak and gave a very eloquent speech. He said something that was very true. When you're mad, you don't do good thinking. And the first 2 words he said weren't good thinking. And I think that's my point of order, not using proper names on the floor. Thank you.
Senator Gru, thank you for that reminder. I appreciate it. And back to you, Senator Wasserberger.
well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. First of all, let's start on page 1 and we'll walk you quickly through this bill. On page 1, we have some findings by the legislature. But how this all started, first of all, there was a situation in Northern Wyoming Community College, and they went through their tier 1 cuts. Those cuts were absolutely the same between Gillette College and Sheridan College. There was nothing that was done that was any different to Sheridan College than it was to Gillette College. You need to remember that on the Northern Wyoming Community College Board of Trustees, there are 7 citizens of Sheridan County. Gillette College is a service area that does not tax itself for higher education, but it does not have any vote on the Northern Wyoming Community College Board. It does have a voice. It has a voice of our chairman of our college advisory board, okay? And so that person, actually, this floor knows that person. He was introduced to the body last year. He's an outstanding young man from Gillette. And so when those cuts happened, Gillette, the community of Gillette, with probably 150 people, went to Sheridan to that meeting. And they spoke to the Northern Wyoming Community College Board of Trustees, okay? And here's the rub. I don't have a problem with the cuts. The cuts were the cuts. They were fair. I spoke first at that meeting. However, the second speaker was the chairman of the Gillette Foundation, the Gillette College Foundation. He had met with his foundation board and they were proposing to spend $525,000 to keep the activity programs at Gillette College going. At the end of the night, when the vote came from the Northern Wyoming Community College Board of Trustees, we didn't even get a motion in favor of our $525,000. What college do you know of in America that doesn't take $500,000? That's the rub, is Gillette has no representation. It is their right to vote on whether or not they should tax themselves and be an independent community college district. It is the one community college out there with the highest assessed valuation that's going to pay for itself. So let's walk through the bill. So after that meeting, people came back to Campbell County, and by noon on Monday, they had 500 signatures on a petition that went to the Campbell County Commissioners. Following state statute, the Campbell County Commissioners filled out an application, which was pages long, asking the Wyoming Community College Commission to allow Gillette College to be an independent community college district. At that point in time, it triggers state statutes. There was an independent resource corporation that we all know so well in this body that did that study. They came to Gillette College. I met with them. They went to Sheridan College for another day. They interviewed people at both campuses. They wrote their opinion, their findings on what they found. And what they said was Gillette College would be a net positive for all community colleges in our state. Okay, that was their independent findings. So then, once that petition went to, we are now on page 2. So at lines 4 through 8, a survey was conducted. And that was presented to the Wyoming Community College Commission on November 20th, 2020. At that meeting, which lasted for 4 hours, at the end of the day, the Wyoming Community College Commission voted to send the application or this bill that we're considering today to the Wyoming legislature. The vote was 7-0 in favor. Every person who I would consider an expert on community college issues voted to approve that application. One of them was from Eastern Wyoming Community College. Okay, and I believe, Mr. Chairman, that walks us through the bill. And so the next step, I think, would be to look at the fiscal note. If you've seen the fiscal note, you have one in front of you. Essentially, it says that the general fund may realize an expenditure decrease related to the increased retirement and health insurance premiums of $2 million in fiscal year 2023 and $2.2 million in fiscal year 2024. Okay, all of that depends upon how quickly Gillette College goes through the accreditation process. And then I would like to talk about very quickly some of the handouts I gave to you. You can see that on this one, talks about Gillette College, Community College District. We have 8 buildings on our campus. Most of them were built with private money or local money. Probably the biggest expenditure by the legislature many years ago. Some of you will remember when we built the Gillette Technical Education Center, and that was a match. It was local money, 17 million, and 17 million from the Wyoming General Fund, which this body approved. So far today, Campbell County locally has committed $90 million to that campus. Of that campus, about 28% of the total square footage is state maintenance. So we have developed sinking funds to all our buildings to help pay for them so that there's really no cost to it. Okay, you can also see the budget. Campbell County right now contributes about $3.5 million of local funds to Gillette College. Okay. If we continue on, we talked about accreditation. We talked about county investments. What will the impact be to other community colleges? The independent survey that we talked about said it would be a net positive. And I believe, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions at this time.
Thank you, Senator Wasselberger. Further discussion before we do, my colleague from Teton County, my apologies. I did breach a Senate rule and I apologize for that. Please accept those and my apologies to the body as well. Further discussion on the bill. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I wasn't going to rise to talk. I had one of the few that lives outside of both the districts, or the new district and the old one, but I have represented Gillette for a number of years now. It's one of the finest colleges I've seen in the state. I've been to all of them, I believe, toured them all. It's local kids at home. and they come back and they work in the community. But the real question isn't what the talk's been this morning. The real question is, are we going to allow a local community to tax themselves to better themselves? And I watch us all the time down here making decisions whether a city can assess a tax to try to attract more business, how we can do it. We talk about diversification. We talk about going forward. And I can tell you for me, I have no problem. We talked about this on the grocery tax a few years ago. He said, well, what happens if Mills enacts one and Evansville doesn't? Well, that's the way towns, cities, and counties differentiate themselves. So folks, for me, the real question is, do we allow them to even try or not? That's the real question, is are we going to allow the voters to either form a district or not? And I think when you boil it down to that, you're being pretty narrow-minded if you tell them that you won't allow the local citizens to try to do something that's in statute. I encourage you to pass it out.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, want to respond to some of the issues out here. I sat on that task force for the last summer, myself and Senator Beba, our former colleague, and some of the things that my colleague from Sheridan County has said is true. We spent a tremendous amount of time on this issue. And we didn't get to the issue of hand of trying to fund all of our community colleges because this ate up a lot of time. That being said, maybe it deserved a lot of time. I'm not passing judgment on that. But to my colleague and my good friend from Crook County, our community colleges aren't just funded based on local appropriations. If that was the case, we wouldn't need all of that money in the budget. And quite frankly, one of the things that we looked at nationwide, community colleges are typically 1/3 state, 1/3 tuition, 1/3 local funding. We're not even there, folks. We're not there. We fund more than 1/3 at the state level, and they've taken significant cuts. I do not begrudge the people of Campbell County wanting to have their own college. But the way this is structured now is, yes, they can fund themselves with 1 mil because they have the valuation today. I'd probably vote for the bill and saying if Campbell County wants to break away and they have the ability to fund it now, but I don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now with the war on hydrocarbons. I don't know. But I would almost guarantee you things change, economies change, and at some point in time, we're probably going to be funding Gillette College out of state funds. Don't know when that'll happen. But here's the thing. We need equalization around the state because right now, these counties are paying 5, in some cases, Laramie County, the only district in the state that's gone and gotten the 6 mil, put it on the ballot and went out there and got it. So under the structure, the districts can go up to 4 at the vote. The board themselves can impose another 5th mil that never goes to the voters, and they can go for a 6th mil. That does have to go to the voters. The only district that's done that is Laramie County. Here's my concern. I don't know what the future is, but I know it's pretty grim financially. And I know it's tough on coal. And we have these battles, and we're going to fight for Campbell County. But I don't know if this is the right time right now to take this on. If we were on good economic circumstances, I would say absolutely. Now, there is another remedy to address the issue that hasn't even been discussed out here. So as you listen to the debate from my colleague from Campbell County and my colleague from Sheridan County about the two communities trying to get together, and this was the decision of the resolution to the problem. But I want to take you back just a little bit. It's because they did not have voting representation on that board is the reason that happened. Because they're a subdivision. They're not part of that district. They're out there. It would have been just as easy to bring a bill and change the makeup of the boards so that they had representation on there based on numbers, campuses, financial commitments, whatever that is. That was another potential remedy that could have solved the concerns for the residents in Campbell County that they're getting told what programs they can and can't have by a board that doesn't represent it. But we're not debating the makeup of the boards. That's a remedy that hasn't even been discussed. I am not going to stand here today and tell you that this is the solution to the problem. I think we've identified what the problem is. This is an alternative, folks. It's an alternative. And it may be the best alternative, but I am absolutely not convinced that we've explored all the alternatives. When we get to that point and we've gone through all the alternatives and it looks like this is the only remedy, I'm going to be standing with Campbell County on local choice, but I am not convinced this is the only alternative that should be considered at this point in time. As bad as I hate to say this, Mr. Chairman, on and against the bill.
Further discussion. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of information for the body. There is a process in our statutes that allows for the annexation of an additional community. I don't want to get into the weeds of it, and I'll leave the bringer of the bill maybe to discuss that, but I don't believe that that alternative to the senator from Baggs's point has been discussed, but maybe we could learn a little bit more about that history as well.
Thank you. Further discussion, Senator Wasserberg. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't have a dog in the fight on any parochial disputes between Sheridan County, Campbell County over the way the current situation is managed. Mr. Chairman, and I don't know what we might do long run about community college funding. And I've got to look at the system as it is right now. And I think there's a couple of salient points here. Campbell County is what? The fourth largest community in our state. Third largest. They're certainly large enough to support their own community college. They have a good assessed valuation now. Yes, the coal industry is in trouble, but they have tremendous oil and gas production as well. They have a lot of resources there. They can, I think, for the foreseeable future, support the college. Right now, we're supporting the general fund. There are some real advantages to Campbell County if they choose to support it with their own funds, have their own elected board that can set the priorities for the college, that knows what their current and future employers may want in terms of trained workforce, and know it better than anybody else. And our current system is that the home district of the community college, I think they're either all or entirely, the college district is the county now. They get extra benefits by controlling their own community college, and we pay for it. You know, I pay the mill levy personally, my share of it, for the one we have in Casper. And it's a tremendous benefit to the community. And I can see how it's going to be a tremendous benefit for Campbell County to have their own. Under the current circumstance, having Campbell County paying for their own college, as they will help our situation, it will save the state of Wyoming general fund money. And we desperately need to do that. It won't happen as fast as we would like because the process of the accreditation is slow. And we can't change that. That's national academic things. We can't change that. And it's important to the students there, and we have to look out for them. What the legislation will do will let the citizens of Campbell County vote on whether they're willing to have a district and pay for it by letting their taxes go up. I don't know how they're going to vote. I think that's going to be the key decision. And I would strongly urge the Senate that it is in our interest, parochially trying to fund the whole system, to let them have that vote. I would say it's only fair if they want to control their own college and pay for it, let them. And for those reasons, I strongly urge this Senate to support this bill.
Ready for the question? No? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a couple of random thoughts. First, I think most of you know that I spent 30 years of my career at one of the colleges. So I know it, I've lived it. Lots of ups and downs. I was around during the days when Casper College was providing the services to the college that we're talking about. I was around when we provided services down to the vice president's county. And both of those counties, by the way, today are among the 16 counties that don't support the community college system. And that's part of the problem. That's part of what we're dealing with today. I too served on your committee on your behalf throughout the past year on that community college funding task force. It was a heck of a lift. And I just want you all to know that this particular bill is not really a byproduct of that task force. It came along parallel. But it does solve one of the problems that the tall senator from the Trona County just pointed out to you. That knocks it down to 15 counties that are now not paying anything into the college system. Campbell County would now, and it would bring a substantial amount into that system. It took my community 17 years to get the opportunity to have an institution of higher learning. They started back in 1928, and we finally opened the second one in Wyoming in 1945. How about that? So it's never an easy thing, is it? I hope this one doesn't take 17 years. I'm going to vote for this. I think the people in Campbell County deserve that opportunity. I'm sorry that it creates a difficulty between two really great colleges. Colleges that when I talked to students through the years, I didn't have any problem with them going to those colleges. They didn't come to ours, they were going to get taken care of at those. So, you know what? Let's keep fighting for this thing. This community college system is known throughout the country, all of you. I no longer am at that college, so I'm not being a PR person. I'm just telling you that this system is one of the best. And it's worth fighting for. I think this is a good one. I urge you to pass the bill tonight. I think it's a good one. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, and I do have a question. And the question is, and certainly Campbell County has the ability to self-fund those, but if we have all these other community colleges that are paying in the 4 mills, and we have a recapture district in my area called Western Wyoming College, if we do this, are we now going to allow them to reduce their mills to only self-fund themselves so they don't have to kick into the system? That's a question I have. And so how would that happen if you have a recapture district that's paying in to help fund the rest of them? When we say one district, and I'm asking the question, I want to know how that's going to work. So how does that work that we say you can I've got a college that they can self-fund, but if they're recapturing, they're paying for the rest of them. Are we now going to allow them to go say, well, we're only going to assess 3 mills because we can self-fund ourselves? And then we reduce the amount. And I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Chairman. But if we're going to do this, and if Campbell County can self-fund, then we have to allow the other district the capacity to do that. And if they want to reduce their mill levies and takes that money out of the pot that's redistributed back, we certainly ought to do that. If we get a district like the one here in our capital city with their assessed valuation gets to the point because they're the only ones that assess 6 mills and they can completely self-fund themselves, why wouldn't we let them do that? And I'm asking the question because I want to know the answer to that. If somebody's got the answer to that question, it would sure help me make up my mind how I'm going to vote on this bill.
Further discussion, Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate a couple of notes before we jump, before I want to speak on what I want to say in regards to this college. We did see the use of a proper name, and just as important, folks, you saw a professional apology, and that's the way the Senate operates. And we do appreciate that. And maybe as procedure, we had not had the main sponsor. We didn't give him a chance to actually explain the bill. We're coming straight out of an amendment and jumping right back into the bill. And we kind of got ahead of that sponsor. And just remember that, folks, we should have had the good senator from Campbell County review the bill before we proceeded into the debate. Appreciate the good debate we're having here. There's one thing I'd like as the sponsor answers the questions from the good vice president and others. One thing I'd like to have him say is, I heard the words, you're going to save the general fund so much. So get your little notepad out and give us a quick response there, good senator from Campbell County. Tell us just how much we're going to save. So it's real clear in our memory as we go into this first vote, just where we're at for the cost savings. And I would commend them at this point for what I see as a route to make this happen. Not necessarily opposed to it. If I take people through my district out in the far west, in 2 different counties, I can say that was Wyoming coal, the majority of it probably from Campbell County that built that beautiful new elementary school there. In community to the north and 3 of my communities in my valley, it's probably Campbell County coal that picked up the tab for some state-of-the-art elementary schools. Let's not have a short memory on who helped our education program across the state. It was Campbell County. So with that, probably leaning into this, probably am, I just am. But I want you to tell us, Mr. Sponsor, just what we are saving that general fund. So it's real clear in our mind. Oh, thank you.
Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you for recognizing me. I appreciate that.
My apologies, Senator Wasserberger. There's some folks that hadn't spoken yet.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think I have 2 questions here. The good senator from Carbon County was talking about bad times, things like that. Quite frankly, that issue will be decided by the Campbell County electorate and whether or not the economy is so bad that the mineral industry can't afford those mills. As of right now, the major associations in those areas of coal or oil are neutral on this issue. And the reason they are neutral is because the number of graduates that Campbell County puts out into the oil patch or the coal mines, electricians, welders, diesel mechanics, and others, kids that can do machine shop that go right to they're hired actually before they graduate. And so let us decide if the times are that bad. Secondly, we talked a little bit about the annexation process, and the good senator from Laramie County talked about that. And the annexation process won't work simply for this reason, for 2 reasons actually. First of all, Gillette has grown from actually the very last time a community college was started was Laramie County Community College, and that was 52 years ago. I was 8 years old. At that time, my brother was a football player. I was 10 years younger than he was. And we went to Gillette to play in the conference championship football game, which the Lusk Tigers won 7-0. I remember it very well. Gillette was a town of 1,500 people. It's now a town of 31,000 people. At that time in 1968, it was a community of about 3,000 people. That's why the number on our license plate is 17, because that's how far down the list we were. And now we're the third largest county in the state, the third largest community city in the state, and we don't have a community college like everyone else. But the reason why the annexation process doesn't work is because Sheridan College would have to give up control of the board because we have outgrown them in population. We would have 4 members on the board. They would have 3. I'm going to tell you right now, the community of Sheridan is not going to play second fiddle to Campbell County. It's never been that way in their philosophy. Secondly, I'm not sure that Campbell County would vote for an annexation because it would have to levy all 4 mills. So that process doesn't work. It's been considered. We've looked at it. So let's move on. The president asked about what are the cost savings? The cost savings are simply this. It kind of depends upon which number you use, but the amount of appropriation that goes from Wyoming Community College Commission to Northern Wyoming Community College Board of Trustees for FTEs at Gillette College, and remember that's based on 12 credit hours per student, that money is $6.1 million, according to the WCCC. If Gillette totally funds itself, that $6 million goes back to the commission, and then it goes out to the other 7 community colleges. That would be about $817,000 per school, a significant increase. However, we cannot promise that in the future because I might not be in this floor. The Joint Appropriations Committee would do that. The WCC would do that. So that's years down the road. We just talked about the accreditation process. If that takes 2 years or up to 5 years, when Gillette College is fully accredited, then that money would do that. Okay, so it's going to take some time. And I hope I've answered everyone's questions, and I think that it's time to call for the question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I did get sent part of an answer I think that we needed to hear, and I'm hoping it's correct. The way the 4 mills works as far as to a different county or different schools and the overflow is trustees have only to access up to 4 mills. If they don't access the whole 4 mill, then they don't get any state funds. And that's off an AG letter apparently. So that answers itself, is if they don't bother going to the full 4 mills, then this is a huge win for the state because they're self-funded. If they do the 4 mills, then they're going to be a recapture and it goes, and they'll have more money anyway. But that's the answer we got. And I think it really does simplify it a bunch. The second one is we had a statement about coal mines in bankruptcy, and Campbell County has no coal mines in bankruptcy at this point in time. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? The question having been called, all those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it
Senator Anderson's got his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Senator Anderson. Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I was voting.
Okay, all those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 83, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 83 has passed committee of the whole. What is the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 40. The clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 40, Wyoming Money Transmitters Act Amendments, an act relating to trade and commerce sponsored by the Minerals Committee, was referred to Committee Number 9, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, Rothfuss, and Wasserberger. Senator Anderson, Chair.
Heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator
Yes.
Anderson? Senator Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 40 do pass. And to explain this great bill is Senator Rothfuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. I hit it. It just didn't stick.
Sometimes that happens, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Senate File 40, Wyoming Money Transmitters Act Amendments is a bill sponsored by the Joint Minerals Committee. This is primarily updates and revisions that are attempts by the Division of Banking to conform and modernize the Money Transmitters Act and conform with FinCEN, which is federal law that relates to it, as well as the Federal Money Transmitter Act provisions. I'll go through it, but there are a few key concepts, and I just want to talk as an overview. First of all, a little bit about what the Wyoming Money Transmitters Act is and does, so that folks that aren't familiar with it can understand what we're talking about a little bit here, and then go through the 4 provisions that are actually changed, and then we'll walk through the bill quickly, Mr. Chairman. The Wyoming Money Transmitters Act is largely uniform language. Each state in the country has some money transmitter act, and they're pretty similar. One exception, I believe, is a state to the north of us, which has not adopted it based on some federal language. And money transmitter concepts are based on stored value. We used to have a pretty straightforward understanding of a money transmitter back when we used to transmit money across the country through certain businesses that did that as their primary business practice. Some of those probably come to mind as means of transmitting currency or cash across the country from individual to individual. Obviously, as technology is modernized, that's become easier and easier, and things have changed. And so now we have things like stored value cards, where you've got gift cards. We've got payment mechanisms and transfer agents that are entirely digital, and a lot of us use those on a daily basis. When we look at the provisions of change that are provided and recommended by the Division of Banking through this legislation during the interim, and again, this is updated almost on a yearly basis. We've got a bill about the Money Transmitters Act with some tweaks and changes. There are a few key concepts that come through in this bill. The first is a clarification of stored value as a payment instrument, and basically indicating that they are one and the same, and we'll see that as we go through the legislation. The second is to clarify some bonding requirements and indicate that the maximum required bonding will be $500,000, which was not clarified before, as well as a small technical change regarding the timeline for bonding requirements. Previously, you actually had to bond before you received your permit. That didn't make a lot of sense in case the application was turned down. So the change just allows you to wait until your application was approved before you provide the bond, and then you're actually going to business and use of it. There's a technical correction, which is administrator for commissioner. That's just clarifying and conforming language. And then the final key point is a change to the renewal fee timeline and procedure. And that's based on some changes to the way the industry practice takes place. I remind the body that the banking division is not a general funded entity. It's all fee-based. So the Division of Banking looks to the way their fee structure is managed to ensure that those that need permits are appropriately paying and reflecting the revenue that they generate. So there's some tweaks there. So as we walk through the legislation, Each of the points that I point out as we go through, Mr. Chairman, are going to be relevant to one of those four themes. On to page 2, line 6, you see that we're just changing some language with regard to authorized delegate conforming language. On line 9, we're eliminating stored value, as I indicated. That is a component within a payment instrument. And there was some confusion by defining it separately. So one of the changes that's recommended by the banking division is to assuage that confusion by not having it called out separately. You see conforming language on line 2, reference to the federal act, and specifically for purposes of this act, stored value shall be deemed equivalent to prepaid access so that they're not separately delineated. Again, this clarification is key because it was causing some confusion among industry where, since it was called out separately, there was a belief that it was a separate thing. It is not. So that clarification consistent with federal law is provided there. On to page 3, conforming language striking stored value once again. Bottom of page 3 is change in the application approval process as we discussed. On to page 4. We've got some change to the bonding language and the stored value language, conforming language, but specifically you see on the lines 4 and 5, an indication of the maximum amount of bonding that would be required not to exceed $500,000. On to page 5, the small tweak where administrator becomes commissioner, because there really is no appropriate administrator. The commissioner is the appropriate agent of action in this statute. Same thing on page 6, all conforming administrator for commissioner language. On to page 7. This is where we get into the renewal and licensing portion of the legislation. As I mentioned, the previous system of money transmitting was based on an entity that would tend to have what are called these subdelegate authorities. You can see authorized delegate and subdelegates on line 9, where it's paid on a per authorized delegate or subdelegate basis. That is just not how the industry works anymore. So you'll have one major national entity that will work entirely digitally, and it will do far, far more business in any given day than the old approach of having these entities, which might be in a local supermarket or might be in a local store or down the street. So the subdelegates were paying on a per entity basis, and that's just not the nature of it anymore. So at this point, there'll be an annual fee that continues, but it will be set by rule and regulation of the commissioner, which is consistent with how most of the rest of the Division of Banking operates. They do it appropriately based on the revenue and set it through rule and regulation. On to page 7. This is another policy change, line 17 and 18, but it's minor. The cost of the examinations will require an assessment to cover the direct cost of the examination, whereas the indirect cost, which was previously paid for in this fashion, will be paid for through the annual fees and that assessment, which again is practice consistent with the other actions. And then on page 8 is just the effective date, which is split based on the applications in 2022 being called out separately for January 1st, 2022, which is consistent with the payment calendar. That is the legislation. Again, it's all requests by the Division of Banking to modernize and conform their language with current practice and best practice. There was no opposition. All the entities that we engaged with supported it. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And there are no amendments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Questions or discussion on the bill? Question on the bill having been called. All those in favor of Senator Anderson's motion, when the committee of the whole does rise and report it, do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 40, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Senate File 40 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 6. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 6, Public Works Contracting Requirements Amendments, an act relating to public works. sponsored by the Judiciary Committee. It
You have
was
heard
ref-
the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Nethercutt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the due pass recommendation of Senate File 6, Public Works Contracting Requirements Amendments. Good senators, this is the work from the Joint Judiciary Interim Committee. It is a judiciary-sponsored bill. Essentially, what the bill does is it attempts to eliminate the practice of what is commonly referred to as bid rigging. And so one of our good Joint Judiciary Committee members recognized some concerns within some communities within our state concerning allegations associated with that practice and wanted to tighten up and eliminate that practice of bid rigging. And so this is intended to bring in all the state agencies, municipalities, and counties who have to do public bidding associated with their contracts for services. And so over the interim, we brought in all of those government entities in addition to many of the industries who bid on these contracts, from the large contracting companies in the state who build the large projects for us, and heard feedback from them, including a number of others who would be implicated from the bill. And so that's the purpose of the bill. There is a standing committee amendment, if I can have that read in.
Will the clerk please read the standing committee amendment?
Senate File 6, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 13, after.
Senator Nethercutt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good senators, so I'll work through the bill, and then where the amendment is relevant, I'll bring that up as well, theoretically. So, Senator, starting on page 2, lines 4 through 8, this is the first requirement for the department to adopt rules for the pre-qualification of bidders on contracts for public works, excluding those public works under the jurisdiction of the State Transportation Commission. So recognizing that there's unique qualifications associated with the building of our roads and horizontal construction as opposed to vertical construction, I wanted to make sure that we didn't have competing interests and subject matter expertise associated with who should be adopting rules. And so kind of trying to keep those two lanes very separately, pun intended. So enjoy, great, Paramcha, thank you. Moving down, procurement for capital construction projects. Again, there's that elimination of having that cross section. Moving through, bottom of page 3, lines 17 through 23. Each public entity shall specify reasonable performance standards for materials and equipment used in the construction of a public work. The public entity may specify suggested individual brands or manufacturers, provided that similar materials or equipment that meet or exceed specifications shall be accepted as a substitute, unless, and here are some of the following exceptions to that. The contracted project is for an existing public work. Substitution of materials or equipment is unworkable. Or 3, the specified materials and equipment to be procured are not furniture or movable equipment not available from a Wyoming resident supplier. And so, senators, one of the purposes of this is to specify those standards for materials. Has to do with, picking a favorite bidder, or creating the bid to be specific to a particular company's product, and really allows for true competitive bidding of that merchandise. So moving down to the other purpose of the bill, page 5 is where a significant amount of changes take place, 4 to 5. So the right to reject bids or responses, the qualification of bidders and respondents. And so we've added language to this provision, starting on page 4 again to page 5, of a public entity that accepts a bid that is not the lowest bid for a public work shall provide a report concerning why that non-lowest bid was accepted. So whereas our statutes encourage the acceptance of the lowest bidder, it's not required. And I think that's important to allow for the entity to pick the appropriate bidder, evaluating all the equitable factors that a public entity should consider when selecting someone to construct these projects, rather than just the lowest bidder. There's an amendment. The amendment does address this issue. So at this time, I want to draw your attention to the amendment. looking at the amendment, Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 6, really the substance of the amendment starts taking place here. All of that prior to is really conforming. And this is where we're striking lines 3 and 4. We are deleting entirely and changing to make available to the public its rationale. So instead of requiring a report to be generated and submitted to the commission, which might just sit on a shelf, if it's requested that the public entity will make its rationale available concerning why the lowest bidder wasn't selected. So transparency there in all of our operations of government. Moving through, the bottom of page 5, line 17, no public entity shall reject a bidder or respondent based solely on the financial strength of the bidder or respondent so long as the bidder or respondent provides sufficient bid, payment, or performance bonds through a surety company approved by the public entity. And so really, we heard some testimony at this interim concerning this issue where certain requirements for bidders to bid on certain construction projects, for example, probably going to step into something here, but I don't know the details, but the testimony we heard had to do with experience building elementary schools. And that really eliminates a lot of the potential construction companies within the state and identified as a result of those restrictions associated with the bidder to really just a few companies that could adequately bid, regardless of, and I think it was, they built them like 5 in the last year. And so that required that construction company to be very large scale, eliminating many of the smaller scale construction companies we have within the state that still might have qualified regardless of that provision. So moving on to page 6, lines 1 through 6. No public entity shall accept a bid if it determines that any of the unit bid prices are significantly unbalanced to the potential detriment of the public entity. So this is also protecting the government entity, not just the government creating competitive fair pricing, but it's also known that the bidders can come together and try to manipulate the bid through conversations with each other in order to create an outcome for all of them to take advantage of. And so in those circumstances, public entities who may suspect that that's occurring are not required to move forward with any of those bids. And I think that's important. So this particular bill tries to provide protections both for bidders in the state who want to bid on public projects and also public entities in the state who fear like that they may be getting taken advantage of as well. All right, moving down to page 8, which is where the amendment also addresses some language. On page 8, after line 23, we are inserting subparagraph H, that the Board of County Commissioners of every county and the governing body of every city or town shall adopt uniform rules for the pre-qualification of bidders on contracts for public works. So I think that this is important. Some challenges that we heard was really the disparate practice of accepting bids or creating bids within a municipality, within a county itself, and then across the state, the disparity between the different public entities. And so in an effort to try to provide some consolidation or uniformity associated with that, that's the purpose of that amendment. I walked through that amendment, good senators. I'm going to move it here in just a minute. Actually, I'm going to move it now. Good senators, I move for your favorable consideration of Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 6 and ask for your favorable consideration.
You going to continue the walkthrough on the bill, or do you want to just stop on the amendment at this point?
On the amendment at this point, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
questions or discussion on the amendment? Question on the amendment. All those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 6, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sensing the interest and intrigue of the body, I am happy to stand for questions at this time.
Discussion on the bill. Discussion and questions on the bill. Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my compliments to the Judiciary Committee. This has been a something that's been plaguing the state for a long time, and we really appreciate the good work in trying to move this football a little bit further down the field to try and make sure that when we have these public works projects that our local folks get a fair shot at trying to make this happen. So I do have a couple of questions. The first one, I think I get it, but particularly with the amendment on page 2, with the amendment, then we excluded not only the State Transportation Commission from the adoption of the rules by the department. Now with the amendment, we're also excluding public works related to airports pursuant to the statute set forth in the amendment. And I just want, I think that I understand that those the airports and the Department of Transportation have their own rules and regulations. And so just confirm that. I think I get that. Then the other thing, just a question as I became curious. So when we get into 15.1 at the bottom of page 2, when we get into 15.1.113 and on into the provisions in Title 16 about the preferences, I just please confirm that those do apply. I think also to if those apply to YDOT as well at that point, so that when we have these contracts for public improvements that we're talking about in 15.1.113 and on page 3 and 16.6.107, just if YDOT is subject to those or not. I think that they are, but anyway, I would appreciate just that confirmation as well. My first question, instead of just confirmation, I guess it's also confirmation on lines 8 through 11 on page 4. We get to this third prong of the exception of kind of when you can bid these specific materials, and I see the exclusion of furniture and movable equipment. And I think this is the intent to get at what's been a long time thorn in the side for those of us who've been monitoring this, is that there's a certain furniture company that everybody likes, but there's not a dealer for that furniture in Wyoming. And so we see it over and over that this furniture gets specified and the only dealer that does is out of Colorado. And I think that's an attempt to make sure that happens. I'm seeing a head nod, so appreciate that. Like I say, they've gone, appreciate you going after some of these loopholes and frustrations that we've had over and over, and we've tried to fix them many times, and we'll see how we see how long this one lasts before they find the loopholes in it too. I think that then the next, my probably real question is on top of page 5, where we have this when you don't have to, a public entity, when they do not have to accept or when they don't accept the lowest bid for public work. And now with the amendment, they have to make available to the public the rationale for not doing that. And I just wondered in there if when we talk about accept that bid that's not the lowest bid, do we need any qualifiers in this new language that references pre-qualified bidders or talk about non-responsive bidders? And to make sure that I don't think anybody wants us to have a lowest bid. We're fine with rejecting a bid from a non-responsive or an unqualified bidder. And just a thought there about maybe if there's some language there that might have to be tightened up. And then finally, I think that might have been all, but like I say, I think it was a really good piece of work, and just those couple of questions and confirm a couple of those for me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Further discussion? Senator Pappas.
All right, thank you. I do have a question. When we talk about bidders, I'm assuming, and I don't know everything in Title 16, so maybe the good chair of the chairwoman of the judiciary could enlighten me, but there are the difference between prime bidders and subcontractors, bidders who bid to the prime bidder. And I've had experience, certainly in my career, that most of the problems have not been with the prime bidder, at least in the architecture community. I don't know about horizontal work with YDOT and with other agencies, but typically the prime bidders are really not the folks we have issues with. It's with the bidders that bid to them. And we've had problems in the past. I just this last and my final project, a certain school here, you all know, in Cheyenne, we did upon the opening of the bids, we found a certain subcontractor that did not perform well for another project that two other projects in the state that they did, large projects, one at the University of Wyoming, did not perform well. Company actually went bankrupt and reformed and bid this project under a new name. We caught wind of it. We recommended to the school facilities department that, we should not go with the low bidder. We eventually convinced both the district, well, the district actually was right on board. They didn't want to have problems with their school. And the SFD ended up agreeing as well. The issue was that company then came back and sued the structural engineers, sued the district. It was a mess. My question is this solely for prime bidders, or can this also be extended to bidders at lower tiers? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe to answer that question directly, it can be extended to bidders at lower tiers, so long as they are the entity bidding directly with the public entity, as opposed to bidding through the prime, the GC, the general contractor, as their subcontractors, right? So it depends. I think some of that concept goes to what the good senator from Natrona County behind me was tangentially alluding to, about who is entitled to all of these requirements, and is it the prime or is it the subcontractors associated with it, and or who gets the report if you're not the lowest bidder, because really the question is who's going to sue, and the public entity now, when they have to provide the rationale as to why another contractor wasn't selected for not being the lowest bidder, is really providing the first communication as to why they're going to be sued. And so who should access that in the interest of transparency? And so I think that the good senator from Natrona County should bring an amendment to only allow for that rationale to be provided to qualified bidders who were not the lowest bidder, to be able to access to have information regarding the rationale. Certainly, of course, that can be pushed further if public entities wanted that. But the truth is, litigation frequently results when someone gets rejected, whether it be or because information is learned that they've previously gone bankrupt for doing bad projects and they've just reformed. And they continue to game the public contracting system as a result of that. And so frequently overlooked, particularly I think in legislative bodies who are seeking transparency and seeking to make sure a process is fair for our business environment, but remembering to protect and be a fiduciary of our state's dollars to ensure how that can also be taken advantage of. So to the good senator from Laramie County, I think the answer is potentially yes. Unsatisfactory. I understand.
Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and appreciate the discussion. Having served all these years on the School Facilities Select Committee, honestly, this is an area of the world that we get probably the most emails. And my question to the good chairman, and commend the work really, is, where is the remedy when we decide that the substitution of materials is just not workable? I mean, is that the kind of thing that just has to probably end up in court? Or is it our agency called A&I or, because really that, at that elementary level, that's really where we get a lot of the phone calls that we do on some of these school projects. So, thank you.
Senator Nethercutt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To go back and answer a couple questions too about the aeronautics division and the exclusion of airports. They are under the Wyoming Department of Transportation, and so they're all kind of subsumed together with that. And WYDOT has strict requirements that apply as well, but this bill is not intended to address those pieces per se. So to the other good senator from Natrona County, who is smaller than the others around me, only I can do this. Page 3, line 17 is really what is attempting to address that. I do think my candid answer to you is that this is a continued effort in the legislature, and public entities will continue to struggle with this. But there will be materials suppliers who will always feel upset when they are rejected and will sue and will make things very difficult and can stop a project. And at least that's my experience. So there's no clear solution out of this, but this is continuing to drive that conversation and drive that effort to help eliminate some of that conduct, but you can't eliminate it entirely.
Further discussion on the bill? Further discussion, Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I'm curious, is I think this is a good piece of work, but was there any testimony, because the way the bill's drafted now, it uses the word public entity. And if you go into the definition, so that would basically roll in, and it uses the subdivision of state government, cities, towns, counties, all of that. My concern is especially in my district where I got 13 towns and the average population is 400 that doesn't have a city engineer. It seems this is going to place a tremendous burden on them. And then take that even a step lower than that. If we go back to page 9, 4110, 113 is powers of district boards. Those are water and sewer districts. Many times these have 16 to 20 people on a system. And now they've got to adopt pretty substantial rules and submit irregularities to the commission. And so just curious is was there any discussion? And I understand the need when we're doing multi-million-dollar projects with large municipalities, but are we putting an undue burden on a couple of towns that I'm thinking of that have 80 or 90 people, and some of these smaller districts that maybe only have 16 or 20 on there? And why did we just single out water and sewer districts out of the 80 or 90 different type of special districts that we have out there? And so just some question, and some of these we look at when we get into the Board of Trustees, it sets that threshold at $30,000. And it looks to me the way this is worded, it does say even though it captures all public entities, it's a public works. And so is actually fixing your sewer system of your water and sewer district, while they meet the definition of a public entity, does that work constitute public work for that public entity? So I'm really worried about the scope when it comes into all of these little bitty towns, you know, the Byrons and the Frannies of the world up in the basin, and the Ottos and the Emblems, the Burlingtons, that have the capacity to come in and comply with a lot of the requirements in here. So just if there was some discussion about the impact, and was that the intent, to capture all of those little guys out there and create a lot more bureaucratic process for them.
Further discussion or questions for the sponsor? Further question or discussion? Senator Pappas.
Yeah, I do have another question for the bringer of the bill. In that paragraph that you had mentioned, page 3, line 17 through 23, about the materials and equipment used in construction of public work. It says the public entity may specify suggested individual brands or manufacturers. And the word may, I'm a little confused with it. What ability are you giving to the public entity by using the word may rather than shall? The issue I have there is, as it goes on, it says that the individual brands of material, provided that similar materials and equipment meet the specifications, shall be acceptable except for the exceptions you give below. We've had some projects, certainly in some of the schools that I've done here in this town, that there is one particular product that we use that's not available, and there's no other equal anywhere. And so maybe that's why the word may is there. I hope that's why it's there, but I want to make sure that that it doesn't preclude owners and designers for specifying a product where no other ones there are no equals. Thank you.
Any further questions for the sponsor? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great question from the good senator from Laramie County concerning that kind of express authorization for the public entity to exercise discretion for whether or not it wants to identify an individual brand. I think goes back to the purpose of the bill, which is the prevention of bid rigging, where the public entity determines the outcome as how it develops the bid. And so we're trying to discourage that, right? Because otherwise you're evading the purpose of public bidding and competitive bidding when you are predetermining the outcome with how you create the bid. That said, you know, the Wyoming legislature understands that there are requirements and qualifications that public entities should be able to freely ask for. And if they have experience with a particular type of product, that we don't want to say it would be inappropriate for that bid to include the specific name brand of that product. Because I think there would be a tendency for the public entity to say that would be improper, to say we want XYZ sheetrock and only XYZ sheetrock. That would feel probably a bit like bid rigging. But there are those circumstances that the good senator from Laramie County identified where there are very few products on a market. There's one that is clearly superior and saves the state money, even though it might cost a little bit more because it's such a superior product. It doesn't need to be repaired or replaced. And so we don't want to discourage that. We want to make sure the public entity is very clear in its expectations and what it wants. You know, so it's that express authority to do that. And I think that that's probably healthy and candid for the public entity to communicate that to potential bidders concerning those products. Hope that answers the question. Concerning the small towns from the good senator from Bags, how small of the town? You know, population 5, we didn't hear from them. But we did hear from the large association that represents all of the association of municipalities in the state. They were at the table and participated in the meetings throughout the interim, as well as the county commissioners and all of the entities that would be affected by this bill. And so a lot of stakeholder feedback concerning that. Candidly, though, I don't recall ever hearing any kind of direct conversations about impacts associated with towns that are very small. However, I would say we did hear testimony about concerns over abuses from some smaller communities within those counties, like Sweetwater, concerning water projects. So I'll leave that where that lands.
Okay, I guess we're not ready for the question after that. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, the other part of the question was, is why did we only roll in with all of the others? There's a multitude of special districts out there, rural fire districts, rural healthcare districts, all of these. And the only one that we rolled into here is 41, 10, 113. Those are water and sewer districts. So I'm just curious, because if you're a rural healthcare district or a rural fire district, those very well may have public buildings by the definition that as they're public entities that we capture. And I'm just, I'm just curious, why were water and sewer districts called out in here and not all of the other districts?
Senator Kolb.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to the question that came up from the good senator from the Baggs region of Wyoming, and particularly about some of the protections that are built into this proposed language. And they talk about unit bid prices. And that's page 6, lines 1 to 6. And it probably doesn't sound like a whole lot, maybe if you don't understand the contracting world, but what the contractors will typically try to do is front load a job. So when you bring in your equipment, you set up and you bring in some parts, whatever they may be in the beginning, they have a lot larger amount of payment than necessary that goes towards the contractor. And what this does is by the time the job, say it doesn't get completed, and there's a problem with completion, someone has to pay money to another contractor. Well, they've taken the profit out of the job before that's happened. And so they leave the job fails, they lack the funds. I know that there's bonding, it's very difficult to collect on. So because the payment schedule was set up in that way, basically it's rigged towards them to get paid up front. And I think the smaller communities, I think that's quite correct. There is an issue because they do lack expertise. This in fact builds in some protections for those folks that don't have the experts as engineers. And I think it affords them a level of protection they currently don't have. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as what I know as a contractor and what this issue means. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, or are you ready for the question? Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at that question, I think that when you go particularly to the application, which one of the big set changes in this is on page 4 and over to 5, it's 16.6.119, and which is out of the public works. And so I think that they're already subject to this particular law. But when you look at just to follow up on what my good friend from Sweetwater County just said, you look what the changes do, and they actually provide some additional flexibility and some additional control to those entities. So one, they're not only protected by this, but they also have, particularly when you look at this, they're talking about the ability to reject or accept bids. So it actually gives them some additional flexibility. But I think they're already subject to this statute. They're already subject to these public works bills anyways, as public entities, and because if they're engaging in public works, I think they're already bound by it.
Thank you, Senator Perkins. Anything more? The question haven't been called for. All those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 6, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 6 has passed the committee of the whole. Folks, we only have 3 short and sweet bills unless the majority floor leader tells me different. Majority floor leader.
We didn't hear that comment. His phone, his microphone wasn't on.
Oh, do it again, Ogden. Wait. Make the motion again.
Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I gotta go back to my script now. Oh, this is the president. I don't do that. Yeah, has he cleared the desk yet?
No, he needs to, we need to ask the committee the whole report to be read.
Right. Yeah, I don't make a motion. No.
We need to read the committee the whole report. There you go.
Mr. President, I move for adoption of the committee of the whole report.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, we need to read in the committee the whole report, and then we can have the motion.
Reading clerk, please read in the committee the whole report.
Mr. President, your committee of the whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 34, do pass. Senate File 83, do pass amended. Senate File 40, do pass. Senate File 6, do pass amended. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Senator Kinski.
Mr. President, I move for adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion is passed. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, you threw the committee of the whole report.
Yes. Go ahead.
Mr. President, Senate File 58, Wyoming Investment in Nursing Funding, sponsored by the Joint Education Interim Committee. I believe it has been read in, but it's been very hard to hear out here some of the routine business at the desk. It has considerable, it's an appropriation. And if it has been read in, I'm going to request that be re-referred to committee number 2 as per Senate rules.
Clarifying that it's been read in, Chief Clerk. Okay, Senator Scott, it has been read in. Absent objection, that will be referred to committee number 2 appropriations. All right. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
Mr. President, I move that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, March 3rd.
Announcements. Chairman Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, agricultural, will meet upon adjournment today in room W2 and online. We have a hybrid format. We'll go ahead and make that start time 5:35, so about, or excuse me, 5:40. So meet down there, committee. Easy for me to say, we'll consider Senate File 114 state land leases and Senate File 122 Wyoming Agriculture Authority.
So confirming that's 5:40, Chairman?
5:40.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Senator Scott.
Mr. President, your committee number 4, education, will meet tomorrow morning, I believe, in room 110 downstairs. So across the hall from where we met on Monday. We'll meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow. First item will be confirmation interviews for the Board of Education. And then we will deal with Senate File 115, education pupil teacher contract time, and Senate File 108, career and technical education terminology. The announcement says if time permits, and I very strongly suspicion that time will permit.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson, just so you don't feel excluded.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your favorite committee, number 9, Minerals, Economic Development and Banking, will meet Wednesday, March 3rd, 15 minutes after noon recess in the Capitol Extension Room WW4W004 and online. We'll hear bills, Senate File 99, Unfair Employment Practices, Senate File 111, School Energy Resources Budget Submittal, Senate File 113, Business Ready Communities Amendments, Senate Joint Resolution Convention of States 2, and Senate Joint Resolution 3, Federal Suspension and Orders on Oil and Gas Production. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Thank you. Let's go to the Senate's other favorite committee, Senator Perkins Appropriations.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, your committee number 2, we try harder appropriations. We'll meet tomorrow at 15 minutes after the noon recess in room E301 and online to take up any re-referrals as assigned. In addition, we will also take up consideration of Senate File 118, Federal Emergency COVID-19 Relief Funding, Senate File 119, Investment of State Permanent Funds, to be followed by Senate File 120, Investment of State Non-Permanent Funds, and if time permits, state funds, investments, and distributions. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Senator Chairman Baldwin, you've been patiently waiting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee, your not favorite committee perhaps, but your perfect committee, the perfect 10, will meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, hybrid and in the room W004 in a connector to consider 2 bills in their collective wisdom. Senate File 80, Public Health Orders, Local and Legislative Oversight, and Senate File 109, Board of Dental Examiners Amendments.
Quite an assumption, Chairman. Chairman Nethercott, and then we'll go back to Chairman Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your number 1 Golden Trophy Committee, the Judiciary Committee, will hear the following 4 bills at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Senate File 75, Protective Order Amendments. Senate File 110, Small Claims Procedures. Senate File 96, Homicide Amendments. And Senate File 101, Pin Register and Trap and Trace Device Authorization. Mr. President, your Judiciary Committee will also meet upon noon recess for Senate confirmation hearings for 3 individuals, for the Director of the Office of Administrative Hearings, the Director of the Department of Corrections, and the Director of the Office of the Guardian Ad Litem, and that will occur upon noon recess tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go, Chairman Landon. You've got anything that would top that?
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs Committee is always going somewhere, and tomorrow upon adjournment, we will be headed to the Causeway, Room 2, down below, just past the toll booth, to take up Senate File 112, Insurance Discount for Accident Prevention Training, Senate File 106, Transportation Statutory Amendments 1, Senate File 107, Transportation Statutory Amendments 2. Those 2 were continued from last night. And Mr. President, the big announcement, Senate File 73, Tolling Authority for I-80, just past the toll booth downstairs tomorrow evening.
I think you just topped it. Okay. All right. Anything else? Any other announcements? Other announcements? All right. You've heard the motion. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Senate shall stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, March 3rd, 10 o'clock Wednesday, March 3rd.